The E-rank gate in Western Seoul stinks of damp earth and goblin piss. Our boy Kang Do-yun steps through the shimmering portal, boots crunching on loose gravel. He's done this exact dungeon run maybe 40 times in the last 5 years. E-rank. Standard layout. Predictable monster spawns. Boring, safe, a paycheck. Behind him, Yoon So-yeon adjusts the strap of her healer's kit, her face calm. She's been his party's medic since they were both nobody rookies, scraping copper coins together. 2 other members file in. A tank built like a fridge named Park Jun-ho, and a lanky archer called Im Seok. Jun-ho cracks his neck and grins, saying this one's going to be milk run number 3 this week. Seok mutters that he's saving up for a new composite bow and needs every clear bonus he can scrape. The gate pulses behind them and seals with a wet tearing sound. Do-yun's been at this for 5 years without anything interesting happening to him. E-rank, bottom of the barrel. The kind of awakener the guilds call when they need warm bodies for cleanup duty. His talent assessment pegged him as having negligible combat potential, a faint sensory quirk that never amounted to much. The association stamped him E-class, and everyone moved on with their lives. He grips the cheap steel dagger at his belt and presses forward into the tunnel. The dungeon's first chamber opens into a wide limestone cavern, dotted with stalagmites and shallow pools. Faint bioluminescent moss casts everything in a sickly green glow. Jun-ho takes point, shield raised, his broad frame cutting a path through the damp air. Seok knocks an arrow and sweeps the shadows with practiced, lazy precision. So-yeon walks beside Do-yun, close enough that her shoulder nearly brushes his. She asks if he's feeling okay, says he's been quiet since they entered. He shrugs and says it's just another Tuesday. They clear the first 2 chambers without drama. 3 goblins, a couple of dire rats, nothing Jun-ho's shield can't handle. Seok pins the rats from 20 meters out. Clean headshots, no wasted arrows. Do-yun stays midline, dagger ready. But honestly, there's not much for him to do. E-rank parties don't exactly need a 5th wheel with a butter knife. The tunnel narrows into a serpentine passage, walls slick with condensation. That's when the air shifts. Do-yun feels it before he hears anything. A prickle at the back of his neck, like static before lightning. He stops walking. So-yeon notices and opens her mouth to speak. And then the ambush hits. Goblins pour from hidden fissures in the ceiling, dropping onto the party like ugly, screeching hail. 6 of them, then 8, then 12. A full war party with rusted blades and yellow eyes blazing. Jun-ho roars and slams his shield into the first wave, buying 2 seconds. Seok fires point blank into a goblin's chest, but 3 more are already swarming him from the left flank. One of them drives a jagged spear through Seok's thigh. The archer screams and drops. Do-yun watches it happen in slow motion. The blood, the way Seok's leg buckles, the goblin yanking its weapon free for a second strike. Something behind his eyes cracks. Like a bone snapping, but inside his skull. The world goes white hot and then wrong. Wrong in a way he cannot name. Every goblin in the cave suddenly wears a glowing red point somewhere on its body. The one nearest Seok pulses at the base of its skull. Another, mid-lunge at Jun-ho, burns bright at the joint where its collarbone meets its shoulder. A third carries a scarlet dot the size of a coin directly over its heart. Do-yun's brain floods with information he doesn't remember learning. Fracture lines, structural vulnerabilities, the exact angle of least resistance through chitin and cartilage. Every single target in his line of sight is screaming its own death at him. He doesn't think. He moves. His dagger finds the first goblin's occipital weak point before the creature can raise its spear again. The blade sinks in with 0 resistance. Like sliding a key into a lock, it was forged to open. The goblin drops. Then he's spinning, slashing across the second one's collarbone seam, and the creature just folds. Its arm detaches, and our boy is already moving to the third. Jun-ho shouts something. Shock, confusion, maybe both, but Do-yun can't process human speech right now. He sees only the red. So-yeon presses her back against the cavern wall, glowing healing energy already flooding towards Seok's leg. Her eyes are locked on Do-yun, wide and unblinking. 4 goblins try to rush him from the right flank, and he sees all of them. Their weak points rotate in his vision, like targeting markers in a fighter jet's HUD. The first one loses its throat. The second catches a dagger thrust through the gap in its ribcage, where the bone never fused correctly. Third and fourth trip over each other's structural failures, and Do-yun dispatches them with 2 precise, almost bored flicks of his wrist. The remaining goblins hesitate. They're not smart creatures, but even a goblin understands when the food chain has flipped. And then the chieftain arrives. It drops from the highest fissure, twice the size of the others, wearing a necklace of human finger bones. Its hide is thick as boiled leather. patched with scars from 100 fights it clearly won. Junho actually steps back, and Junho never steps back. The chieftain raises a brutal, notched cleaver and bellows a challenge that echoes through the whole cavern. And Do-yun sees it, a brilliant, screaming crimson dot, not on the creature's hide or skull or chest, but underneath its jaw, in the soft hollow where the throat meets the tongue. A gap in the armor that no one could possibly reach without getting cleaved in half first. The chieftain charges. Junho braces. Seok, still bleeding on the ground, tries to draw his bow with shaking hands. And our boy Kang Do-yun simply walks forward. Not runs, walks. He steps inside the chieftain's swing, feels the wind of the cleaver pass an inch from his ear, and drives his cheap steel dagger upward through the glowing point. The blade punches through the soft tissue with a wet, final sound. The chieftain freezes mid-swing. Its yellow eyes go wide, then empty. The body hits the ground like a sack of wet cement. Silence. 12 dead goblins and one very dead chieftain litter the cavern floor. Junho stares at Do-yun like he's never seen him before. Seok, pale from blood loss, manages a single confused syllable. So-yeon has stopped healing. She's just watching, her hands hovering uselessly over Seok's wound. Do-yun opens his mouth to say something, anything, but the world won't stop breaking. The red doesn't fade, it spreads. The dead goblin's weak points wink out, but everything else in his field of vision lights up like a city at night. The stalagmites show their fracture planes. The limestone walls display their load-bearing stress vectors. Junho's shield reveals the exact rivet that will fail under sustained impact. Seok's wound pulses with a dark, ugly red, where the infection will set in if it's not cleaned within the hour. He sees the structural weakness in Junho's left knee, the old injury the tank never talks about. He sees the fragile point in Seo-yeon's healing magic, the limiter she unconsciously places on herself because she's afraid of burning out. He sees everything, and it doesn't stop. He sees the microfractures in the cavern ceiling from the goblin's tunneling. He sees the stress lines in his own dagger where the cheap steel is about to snap. He sees the weak points in the dungeon gate itself, the thin membrane between this pocket dimension and the real world. His vision swims. The red bleeds together into a single, agonizing crimson tide. Do-yun drops his dagger and claws at his eyes. Bad idea. His hands show up in his vision too. Every knuckle joint and tendon insertion point glowing like runway lights. He's drowning in it. Junho grabs his shoulder and asks what the hell is happening, but Do-yun can barely hear him over the roaring in his ears. Seo-yeon abandons Seok and rushes to him. She's saying his name over and over, her voice high and tight with fear. He tries to tell her he's fine, but the words won't form. His legs buckle. He hits the ground hard, knees cracking against the limestone, and the impact sends a fresh wave of structural data flooding his brain. The floor has a fault line running directly beneath his position. If a fight breaks out here again, this whole section collapses. He can see exactly how many tons of rock will fall and exactly which way to run. He doesn't want to see any of it. He wants it to stop. Seo-yeon's hands cup his face, and warm golden light spills from her palms into his temples. Her healing magic isn't just for flesh and bone. She's always been able to soothe the mind too. Junho says her name in warning, because healing mental strain takes a toll, and she's already drained from treating Seok. She ignores him. Golden light pushes back against the crimson tide, and slowly, so slowly, the flood of weak points begins to recede. His vision clears in patches. First, the cavern walls go dark. Then the stalagmites, then Junho's shield and Seok's wound, and the dungeon gate all flicker out like candles in a wind. The last thing to fade is the weak point on So-yeon's magic, that tiny limiter she's placed on herself, and he catches a single glimpse of what she could become if she ever let go. Then that too is gone. He's on his knees in a damp cave, gasping like a drowning man, with his childhood friend's hands glowing against his skull. Seok calls from the ground, asking if someone wants to explain what just happened. Junho just shakes his head, saying Do-yun moved like an S rank. S rank. The word hangs in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Do-yun looks at his own hands. They're shaking. There's goblin blood under his fingernails and a dead chieftain 10 feet away, and he doesn't fully understand how any of it happened. He knows one thing with absolute gut-level certainty. Whatever talent was sleeping inside him for 5 years just woke up, and it's not done with him yet. The dungeon air is still thick with goblin stink and the copper tang of blood. Junho hefts his shield onto his back and stares at the dead chieftain like it might get up again. It doesn't. Seok tries to stand, fails, and settles for propping himself against a stalagmite with a pained grunt. His thigh wound is still seeping red through the makeshift bandage Seo-yeon slapped on before everything went sideways. Nobody speaks. The four of them just breathe in the damp dark, surrounded by 12 goblin corpses and a whole lot of questions. Seo-yeon's hands are still trembling against Do-yun's temples, the last threads of golden light fading from her palms. She's pale. Paler than she should be after a simple healing pulse. Do-yun finally raises his head. His eyes are clear now. The crimson tide receded, but he looks 10 years older. He thanks her quietly. She doesn't answer. She just stares at him like she's trying to recognize a face she's known since childhood. Junho breaks the silence first. He asks what the hell just happened in there. Not a rhetorical question. He wants an answer. Do-yun opens his mouth, closes it, and realizes he doesn't have one. Not one that makes sense. He tries anyway. He says his vision shifted. He says he could see things he shouldn't be able to see. Fractures in the rock. Stress points in Junho's shield. Exact angle to drive a blade through the chieftain's jaw and into its brainstem. Junho looks at the dead chieftain, then at Do-yun's cheap dagger still slick with black blood, then back at Do-yun. He says Do-yun moved like an S rank. Seok barks a laugh from his spot against the stalagmite and immediately regrets it as pain shoots up his leg. He wheezes that S ranks don't run E rank dungeons for chump change. Seo-yeon doesn't laugh. She asks Do-yun if the visions have stopped. There's something careful in her voice, the tone of a healer who's seen psychological breaks before and knows how to triage. Do-yun nods, but the nod is hesitant. He says the red is gone, but the knowledge is still there. He glances at the dungeon gate shimmering 50 meters down the tunnel. The weak point he saw earlier, the thin membrane between this pocket dimension and the real world, it's not glowing anymore. But he remembers exactly where it was. He could point to it right now if anyone asked. No one asks. A distant rumble echoes through the tunnel system, followed by the unmistakable sound of heavy boots on limestone. Lots of them. Junho's hand goes to his weapon, but So-yeon grabs his wrist. She says those aren't monster footsteps. They're too coordinated. She's right. 6 men in black tactical gear pour into the cavern 30 seconds later, their chest plates stamped with the golden scale emblem of the Korean Awakener Association. Assessment Division. 2 of them carry sensor equipment that's already whirring and clicking as they scan the chamber. The lead agent, a woman with a severe ponytail and the kind of face that's never been surprised by anything, takes one look at the carnage and raises an eyebrow. She asks who's responsible for this. Junho and Seok both point at Do-yun without hesitation. Seo-yeon doesn't point, but she doesn't deny it either. The agent's name badge reads Park So-young, Senior Assessor. She pulls up Do-yun's file on a data tablet, scrolls for a moment, and frowns. She says his last evaluation listed him as E-class with negligible combat potential. Her tone makes it clear she's not asking. She's stating a fact that no longer matches reality. Do-yun climbs to his feet, wipes goblin blood on his already ruined pants, and says his file might need an update. Park So-young looks at the dead chieftain, then at Do-yun's cheap steel dagger, then at the terror still lingering in Seo-yeon's eyes. She says she'll be the judge of that. She orders her team to secure the area and tells Do-yun he's coming with them for immediate reevaluation. Not a request. Junho steps forward, bristling, but Do-yun puts a hand on his chest and shakes his head. He says he'll go. So-yeon grabs his wrist before he can walk away and asks if he's sure he's stable. The real question underneath is plain. What happens if the visions come back in the middle of a test? Do-yun doesn't have an answer, but he gives her the best smile he can manage. Tired, shaky, but genuine, and tells her to take care of Seok. He follows Park So-young out of the dungeon. The transition from dungeon dim to surface sunlight is brutal. Do-yun squints against the glare as they emerge through the gate into a cordoned-off parking lot behind a convenience store. 3 black vans are waiting, along with a mobile command unit that looks like it costs more than everything Do-yun owns combined. Park So-young gestures toward the largest van and tells him to get in. He does. 20 minutes later, Do-yun is standing in a sterile white room at the association's Seoul headquarters, stripped of his ruined gear and dressed in standard-issue testing fatigues. The room is 40 meters across, lined with impact-absorbing panels, and equipped with more sensors than a hospital ICU. Park So-young observes from behind reinforced glass, flanked by 2 analysts Do-yun doesn't recognize. A third analyst, a nervous-looking guy with glasses, attaches monitoring patches to Do-yun's temples and chest. He tells Do-yun the test is simple. They're going to throw progressively stronger opponents at him, and he's going to demonstrate his awakened ability. Do-yun asks what happens if he can't control it. The analyst says that's exactly what they're trying to determine. So that's comforting. The first opponent is a combat dummy programmed to move like a D-rank brawler. It lumbers forward with mechanical precision, arms swinging in wide haymakers. Do-yun sees its weak point immediately, a glowing red spot at the actuator joint where the right shoulder connects to the torso. One precise strike with his palm, and the arm goes dead. The dummy keeps coming with its remaining limb, but Do-yun sidesteps easily and drives his elbow into the glowing point on the knee actuator. The whole thing crumples. Park So-young's voice crackles through the intercom. She says that's one. She sounds unimpressed. The next dummy is faster, stronger, programmed to mimic a C-rank martial artist. Do-yun sees 3 weak points, picks the one on the base of its spine, and uses a spinning kick he hasn't practiced in 3 years. The dummy seizes up and collapses in a heap of sparking wires. Park So-young doesn't even comment this time. She just taps her tablet and signals for the next test. The B-rank dummy is armed, a blunt training sword, and a shield generator that flickers with blue energy. Do-yun doesn't have a weapon. He doesn't need one. The shield generator pulses with a weak point right at the power coupling. So obvious it might as well have a bullseye painted on it. He ducks under the dummy's first swing, slaps the coupling with an open palm, and watches the shield flicker and die. One more strike to the glowing spot on the dummy's chest plate, and the whole unit powers down with a sad electronic whine. Park So-young leans toward her microphone. She asks if he's even trying. 3 analysts exchange glances behind the glass. Nervous one writes something on his clipboard that Do-yun can't read. Do-yun just shrugs at the window and says he's not much of a fighter. Park So-young's expression doesn't change, but her fingers fly across her tablet with new urgency. She orders the S-rank simulation. The analysts go quiet. Even the nervous one stops writing. The floor panels open, and a combat automaton rises from the sublevel. A hulking, chrome-plated war machine with 6 articulated arms, each tipped with a different weapon. It's 2 meters tall and 3 meters wide, and it moves like liquid metal. Do-yun's vision flickers. Not the full crimson flood, more like a warning pulse. The S-rank dummy lights up with more weak points than anything he's faced so far. But they're smaller, tighter, harder to hit. The elbow joints glow. Knee servos pulse. The neck coupling at the base of the skull. But there's one weak point that burns brighter than all the rest. A power core buried deep behind 3 layers of armor plating. He can't reach it directly. He'll have to make an opening. The automaton attacks without warning, all 6 arms swinging in a synchronized assault pattern that would turn a normal human into confetti. Do-yun's body moves before his brain catches up. He ducks under a blade arm, sidesteps a hammer strike, throws himself flat to avoid a spinning flail, and rolls past a thrusting spear. One of the arms clips his shoulder, not a direct hit, but enough to send him stumbling. Pain flares hot and sharp. But he saw something in that exchange. The arms slow down by a fraction of a second after a full rotation, just long enough for the shoulder joint to cool its servos. That's the window. He waits for the next attack cycle, counts the rotations, and watches the arm slow at the exact moment he predicted. He lunges. His hand drives into the shoulder joint, not with strength, but with precision, and tears out a cluster of wires. The arm goes dead, sparks showering from the socket. The other 5 arms keep coming, but now the automaton's balance is off. Do-yun exploits it ruthlessly. Elbow joint, dead. Knee servo, dead. Second elbow, dead. Within 30 seconds, 3 arms are hanging useless, and the automaton is listing hard to one side. Final weak point, the power core, is exposed behind a cracked chest plate. Do-yun drives his fist through the gap. The automaton shudders, sparks, and goes dark. Silence. Behind the glass, no one moves. Park So-young stares at her tablet. The nervous analyst drops his clipboard. The other 2 just watch Do-yun with something between awe and fear, the way people look at a natural disaster. Park So-young's voice crackles through the intercom one more time. She says he didn't just beat the S-rank simulation. He dismantled it in under a minute. She says the last person to do that was an S-rank awakener with a combat-specific talent. She says Do-yun was supposed to be E-class. Do-yun pulls his hand out of the dead automaton and flexes his bruised knuckles. He asks if that means his file gets updated. 6 hours of medical scans, blood tests, mana resonance imaging, and psychological evaluation later, Do-yun sits alone in a windowless conference room. Monitoring patches are gone, replaced by a fresh set of fatigues and a cup of cold coffee he hasn't touched. The door opens. An older man in a crisp suit steps inside. Silver hair combed back, eyes sharp as a hawk, shoulders straight despite his age. His ID badge reads Director Yoon, Association Command. He doesn't introduce himself. He doesn't have to. Everyone in the awakened world knows Director Yoon. He's been running the Korean Association for 20 years, steering it through monster breaks, guild wars, and 3 separate government investigations that all mysteriously went nowhere. He sits across from Do-yun and folds his hands on the table. He says Do-yun's test results are extraordinary. He says in 30 years of overseeing awakenings, he's never seen a latent ability manifest this late or this powerfully. He says the association is prepared to re-rank Do-yun as S-class, effective immediately. The words hang in the air. S-class. The highest rank. The 1% of the 1%. Do-yun should feel elated, vindicated. 5 years of being written off as worthless, erased in a single afternoon. Instead, he just feels tired. He asks what the catch is. Director Yoon smiles. It doesn't reach his eyes. He says there's no catch, only an opportunity. The Titan Guild, he explains, is the association's elite strike force, staffed exclusively by A-rank and S-rank awakeners. They handle the most dangerous dungeons, the highest stakes operations, and the threats that ordinary guilds can't touch. He wants Do-yun to join, not apply, not interview, join. Today. Do-yun leans back in his chair and studies the director's face. He's not naive enough to think this is a gift. Someone doesn't rise from E-rank to S-class and walk straight into the association's top guild without strings attached. He asks what the strings are. Director Yoon's smile tightens just a fraction. He says the strings are simple. Do-yun will work for Titan, follow association directives, and in return, he'll receive the best training, equipment, and support money can buy. He'll also be under the association's protection, which, the director adds, is not a small thing. A newly awakened S-rank with a unique ability is a target. Every guild, every corporation, every foreign government with an interest in Korean dungeons will try to recruit him, pressure him, or eliminate him before he becomes a threat. The director's protection keeps them at bay. Do-yun hears what he doesn't say. The protection also keeps Do-yun on a leash. He asks for time to think. Director Yoon stands, adjusts his cuffs, and says Do-yun can think until tomorrow morning. After that, the offer expires. The Titan Guild headquarters occupies the top 12 floors of a skyscraper in Gangnam that doesn't exist on any civilian map. Do-yun arrives the next morning in civilian clothes, a hoodie and jeans, because everything else he owns is still covered in goblin blood. The lobby is all glass and steel and polished marble, staffed by receptionists who look like they could kill a man with a pen before security even noticed. A junior agent escorts Do-yun to the 47th floor, which is dedicated entirely to training facilities. The main hall is the size of a football field, divided into sparring rings, weapons ranges, and simulation chambers. At least 24 awakeners are already training, some running drills, some sparring. A few just sitting in meditation with mana visibly crackling around their bodies. Every single one of them is at least A-rank. Do-yun feels very small and very out of his league. The junior agent leads him past the main hall to a quieter section at the back, where a private training room sits behind a reinforced door. Inside, a single man is seated in the center of the floor, eyes closed, breathing slow and steady. He's older, late 50s, maybe 60, with a weathered face and gray-streaked hair pulled back in a short ponytail. A faded scar runs from his left temple down to his jaw, and his hands are covered in calluses so thick they look like armor plating. This is Baek Hyun-woo, retired S-rank, former Titan Guild leader, legendary awakener who walked away from it all 10 years ago and hasn't been seen in public since. He opens his eyes as Do-yun enters, and for a long moment he just looks at him. Not assessing, not judging, just seeing. He says Do-yun looks like hell. Do-yun laughs before he can stop himself, a short, surprised sound that feels foreign in his chest. He says it's been a long couple of days. Baek nods like he understands exactly what that means. He gestures for Do-yun to sit, and Do-yun does, folding himself onto the mat across from the older man. Stats director Yoon told him about the awakening. He says the director thinks Do-yun is the most promising asset the association has acquired in a decade. He says the director is wrong. Do-yun blinks. He asks what that means. Baek leans back on his hands and studies the ceiling, like it might have answers. He says Do-yun isn't an asset. He's a variable. Something the association doesn't fully understand and can't fully control. And in Baek's experience, the association doesn't handle variables well. They try to break them, bind them, or bury them. Do-yun's stomach tightens. He asks why Baek is telling him this. Baek's eyes slide back to Do-yun. And for the first time, there's something sharp in them. Something dangerous and knowing. He says he was once the association's most valuable asset. 10 years ago, he led a team of 6 S-rank awakeners into an SS-class dungeon on Jeju Island. They were the best of the best, equipped with top-tier gear and backed by the association's full resources. The dungeon was supposed to be cleared in 3 days. On day 2, they realized it was a trap. Not a dungeon break, a setup. Someone inside the association had fed them false intel, sent them into a nest 5 times larger than any scan had indicated. Beck was the only one who walked out. He lost 6 friends, his entire team, because someone in command decided they were expendable. He spent the last 10 years trying to prove it. And in 10 years, he's found nothing but locked doors and dead ends. He says the association is not what it seems. He says Director Yoon is charming and patient and utterly ruthless. He says Do-yun's ability is the kind of thing the director will use until it breaks, unless Do-yun learns to protect himself, not just from monsters, from the people giving the orders. Do-yun sits in the quiet of the training room and feels the weight of those words settle into his bones. He thinks about Director Yoon's smile, the one that didn't reach his eyes. He thinks about the strings attached to S-rank protection. He thinks about how fast the association moved to claim him, to test him, to pull him into their orbit before anyone else could. He asks Beck why he's willing to train him. Beck stands, knees popping, and walks to a weapons rack on the far wall. He selects a simple wooden practice sword and tosses it to Do-yun. He says Do-yun's ability, seeing weak points, is the most dangerous talent he's ever heard of. Not because it's powerful, because it's a threat to people who rely on things staying hidden. He says someone needs to teach Do-yun how to survive long enough to use it. He says it might as well be him. Do-yun catches the practice sword and holds it awkwardly. He's never been good with weapons, never had the strength or speed to make them count. The wood feels solid in his hands. Beck picks up his own practice sword, settles into a loose fighting stance, and says their first lesson starts now. He charges. Beck charges, and our boy has exactly 0 time to think about anything else. The old man crosses the distance between them in half a heartbeat. Practice sword already coming down in a diagonal slash that Do-yun barely registers before his body moves on instinct. He throws himself sideways, and the wooden blade whistles past his ear close enough to shave skin. Do-yun hits the mat hard, rolls, and comes up with his own practice sword held in front of him like a shield that won't actually stop anything. Beck doesn't give him a second to breathe. The next strike comes low, sweeping for his ankles, and Do-yun jumps it like a child skipping rope, lands awkwardly, stumbles 3 steps backward until his shoulders hit the wall. His chest is already heaving, and they've been at this for maybe 8 seconds. Beck straightens up and rests his practice sword on his shoulder like it weighs nothing. He asks Do-yun if that's really all he's got. Do-yun pushes off the wall and forces his lungs to slow down. He says he's never been good at this part. Beck nods like that's exactly what he expected to hear, and says that's about to change. The old man comes at him again, this time with a flurry of strikes Do-yun can't track. And he's getting smacked on the shoulder, the ribs, the thigh. Each hit a sharp sting that leaves a bruise before he even registers the impact. He tries to block, and the sword gets knocked right out of his hands. It clatters across the mat, and Do-yun is standing there defenseless, with his arms stinging and his lungs burning. Beck lowers his weapon and looks at him with something that might be disappointment, or might be patient. He says Do-yun's problem isn't strength or speed. It's that he's been fighting like prey his whole life, not like a predator. Do-yun retrieves his practice sword and asks what the difference is. Beck says prey reacts to danger. Predators create it. He tells Do-yun to pick up the sword and come at him with intent for once. Do-yun grips the wooden blade tighter, feels the sweat on his palms, and takes a deep breath. Then he lets his vision shift. It's easier this time. The world doesn't turn into a blinding crimson flood. It just sharpens, clarifies, each surface resolving into layers of information that his brain processes faster than he can consciously understand. Baek Hyun-woo lights up like a constellation. Every joint, every tendon, every millimeter of scar tissue covering his body is mapped in Do-yun's sight as a golden thread of structural vulnerability. The old man is a fortress built on 1,000 tiny fault lines. Do-yun moves. He doesn't think about angles or footwork or technique. He just steps into the space where Beck's guard isn't and thrusts. The practice sword slides past Beck's parry by the width of a fingernail and taps him right under the ribs where a cluster of nerves sits unprotected. Beck freezes. The tap wasn't hard enough to hurt, but the old man stares at Do-yun like he just saw a ghost pick up a weapon. He asks Do-yun if he can see them on people too. Do-yun's vision flicks back to normal, and he nods, breathing hard. Beck lowers his practice sword completely. He says that changes everything. He says Do-yun needs to understand exactly what he's carrying around in his skull. Not just a combat ability, but a threat to every structure that relies on people not seeing where the cracks are. Do-yun asks what kind of structures. Beck's expression goes flat and careful. He says every structure. He says guild alliances, association hierarchies, government contracts, the whole system that keeps awakeners fed and controlled, and pointed at dungeons instead of at the people running things. He says Do-yun's eyes are the one thing that can expose all of it. Do-yun's stomach turns cold. He asks if Baek is telling him the association will come after him. Baek picks up his practice sword and walks it back to the weapons rack. He says the association already has. He says they moved on Do-yun within hours of his evaluation. Put him in a room with Director Yoon. Offered him the biggest carrot they've got. He says the question isn't whether they'll try to use him. It's whether Do-yun will figure out he's being used before it's too late. Do-yun stands in the empty training room with a wooden sword in his hand and feels the weight of the last 48 hours settling into his spine. Like concrete. He thinks about Director Yoon's smile. He thinks about the way the man leaned forward when Do-yun mentioned his ability. Hungry, controlled, but hungry. He thinks about the fact that he never once questioned why the director of the entire Korean Awakener Association personally showed up to recruit a freshly ranked S-class. And right there, standing on the mat with bruises forming on his ribs and Baek's words still ringing in his ears, Do-yun makes a decision. He thanks Baek for the lesson and asks if they can continue tomorrow. Baek looks at him for a long moment. Then the old man nods once and says he'll be here. Do-yun walks out of the private training room, through the empty corridors of the Titan Guild headquarters, and into the main hall, where 24 A-rank awakeners are still drilling themselves into exhaustion. Nobody looks at him twice. He's just another face in the crowd now, just another S-rank in a building full of them. His civilian clothes, the same hoodie and jeans he put on after the evaluation, make him look like a trainee who got lost. It's almost midnight when Do-yun finds himself standing outside Director Yoon's office on the 8th floor of the association's administrative wing. The lights are still on. He knocks. Director Yoon's voice comes through the door, calm and unhurried, telling him to come in. The office is exactly what Do-yun expected. Expensive without being flashy, organized without being sterile. Every surface clean and deliberate and placed exactly where it belongs. Director Yoon sits behind a broad desk of dark wood with a single tablet glowing in front of him. He smiles when he sees Do-yun and gestures to the chair across from him. He says he didn't expect Do-yun to come back tonight. He asks if Do-yun has made his decision about the guild offer. Do-yun sits down and doesn't answer the question directly. Instead, he says he's been thinking about what the director told him earlier, about the association being a family, about trust and loyalty, and protecting each other. He says he wants to believe that. Director Yoon's smile doesn't change, but something behind his eyes flickers. He says Do-yun should believe it because it's true. Do-yun lets his vision shift. The office resolves into its component weaknesses, stress fractures in the window frame, a loose coupling in the ventilation duct, the tamper-proof seal on Director Yoon's desk drawer that isn't actually tamper-proof at all. And then Do-yun looks at Director Yoon. The man's body is a normal human body. Aging joints, minor arterial plaque. The kind of vulnerabilities Do-yun could exploit in a dozen different ways if he needed to. But there's something else. A faint point of light sits in the center of Director Yoon's chest, right where the sternum meets the ribs. It's not red like the weak points Do-yun sees on enemies or mechanical targets. It's not golden like the structural vulnerabilities he mapped on Baek Hyun-woo's scarred body. This one is a color Do-yun's brain doesn't have a name for. A pale, white-blue light that pulses in a rhythm completely out of sync with the director's heartbeat. And it isn't natural. Do-yun forces his vision back to normal before his expression can give anything away. Director Yoon is still smiling that patient, grandfatherly smile. Do-yun says he'll take the guild offer. Director Yoon's eyes crinkle at the corners, and he says that's wonderful news. He says Do-yun made the right choice. He says the association will take care of everything from here. Housing, training, equipment, a full support team. He says Do-yun is part of the family now. Do-yun shakes the man's hand and feels the unnatural pulse of that white-blue point even through the handshake. He doesn't know what it is. He doesn't know what it means. But he knows Baek was right. Director Yoon is hiding something under his skin that doesn't belong there. Do-yun walks out of the office with a smile on his face that feels like a lie stretched thin over his teeth. He takes the elevator down to the lobby, crosses the marble floor, and steps out into the cold, Seoul night. The city is quiet at this hour, streetlights pooling orange on empty sidewalks. The distant hum of traffic, the only sound for blocks in any direction. Do-yun pulls his hoodie tighter and starts walking. He doesn't know where he's going. His old apartment is a cheap studio on the other side of the city, and he hasn't been back there since evaluation. But he needs to move. He needs to think. Someone inside the association built Director Yoon with a weakness that isn't human. Someone inside the association sent Baek's team into a trap 10 years ago and buried the evidence so deep Even an S rank couldn't dig it up. Someone inside the association is going to realize eventually that Do-yun can see things they don't want seen. He stops walking under a flickering streetlight and stares at his hands. They're still bruised from the training session. Red marks already darkening into purple on his knuckles. 2 days ago, he was an E-rank nobody clearing goblin dens for pocket change. Now he's an S-class weapon with a target painted on his back, and a director whose chest glows like a faulty reactor. He looks up at the sky, light-polluted soul sky, barely any stars visible, and makes a vow right there on the empty street. He's going to find out what Director Yoon is hiding. He's going to find out who built that weak point into his chest, and why. If the association tries to use him the way they used Baek Hyun-woo, he's going to show them exactly what his eyes can do. He doesn't sleep that night. He finds a 24-hour convenience store, buys a cup of terrible coffee, and sits in the corner watching the door until dawn breaks over the city. 20 minutes after sunrise, every screen in Seoul goes red. The emergency broadcast system kicks in with a sound Do-yun has heard 100 times in drills, but never in real life. A piercing tone that cuts through every speaker, every television, every phone in the metropolitan area. A voice comes through, calm and clipped, announcing a Class S dungeon break in the Gangnam district. Voice says all citizens within a 5-kilometer radius are ordered to evacuate immediately. The voice says all available A-rank and S-rank awakeners are being mobilized to the site. Do-yun's phone buzzes before the broadcast even finishes. It's Park So-young's number. She says there's a transport already on the way to his location. The association tracked his phone. She says he's been temporarily assigned to a strike squad under Guildmaster Kwon Jae-sun. She says the guild offer paperwork is being fast-tracked, and he's officially a Titan operative as of this moment. Do-yun asks how bad it is. Park So-young pauses. Then she says the dungeon is spitting out creatures nobody's ever seen before, and they've already overrun 3 blocks. She says the first responders are dead, and 2 A-rankers are missing. She says the boss hasn't even surfaced yet. The transport is a military-grade van with reinforced plating and an engine that screams like a wounded animal. Do-yun climbs into the back and finds 4 other awakeners already strapped in. 2 men, 2 women, all of them looking at him with the kind of exhausted hope that comes from knowing the new guy might be the difference between living and dying. The squad leader, a woman with a burn scar covering half her face, introduces herself as Captain Min. She says she's heard about his ability and asks if it's as good as the rumors say. Do-yun doesn't know what the rumors say, but he nods anyway. He tells her he can see weak points on anything he looks at. He says he'll call out targets as they engage. Captain Min grins. It's not a friendly grin. It's the grin of someone who's been fighting monsters for 15 years and just got handed a cheat code. She tells the driver to step on it. Gangnam is a war zone. The van screeches to a halt 2 blocks from the dungeon breach, and Do-yun can see the damage through the windshield. Shattered storefronts. Overturned cars. A column of black smoke rising from somewhere deeper in the district. The breach itself is a massive tear in reality, hanging in the middle of what used to be an intersection, purple-edged and pulsing like a wound that won't close. Monsters are pouring out of it in waves. They're not goblins. They're not anything with a name in the association's bestiary. They're humanoid, but wrong. Too many joints, too many eyes, limbs that bend in directions biology doesn't allow. Skin the color of old bruises. Captain Min is already out of the van, her squad falling into formation behind her. Do-yun follows and lets his vision shift. The world transforms. Every monster in his line of sight resolves into a map of vulnerabilities, joints, organs, connections that shouldn't exist but do, each weak point glowing crimson against the chaos. He starts calling targets. He points to the first wave and tells the squad to aim for the 3rd joint on the left leg. It's structurally unsound. Min's blade takes a creature's leg off at exactly that point, and it collapses, shrieking, before one of the other squad members puts a spear through its skull. Do-yun's voice stays steady even as his heart hammers against his ribs. He calls another target, the seam where the shoulder meets the torso on the larger variant. He calls a 3rd, the cluster of nerves at the base of the skull, on the ones that move too fast to track. The squad moves through the first wave like a machine, with Do-yun as its targeting computer. Each strike landing exactly where it needs to. Each kill clean and efficient. Captain Min shouts over the chaos that they're pushing toward the breach. She says they need to contain the spawn point before the boss emerges. Do-yun sees it before anyone else does. Not the boss, the dungeon floor. His vision, still wide open and tracking every weak point in the battlefield, catches something beneath the surface of the intersection. A network of seams runs through the asphalt like veins, too regular to be natural cracking, too deliberate to be random damage. They converge on a point 20 meters below street level. There's something down there. something that was built before the breach ever opened. He shouts to Captain Min that there's a structure under the dungeon floor. He says it looks artificial. She doesn't question him. She just nods and says they'll deal with it after they close the breach. And then the ground splits open, and the boss climbs out. Corrupted Titan is 20 meters tall if it's a centimeter. A humanoid shape wrapped in plates of bone-like armor that shift and grind against each other with every movement. Its face is a smooth mask of the same material, featureless except for 2 pits where its eyes should be, glowing with the same purple light that edges the breach. Captain Min's squad freezes. Every awakener on the street freezes. Because this thing isn't like the other monsters. This thing is radiating power in waves that Do-yun can feel pressing against his skin. Pressure that makes his ears pop and his vision blur at the edges. The Titan raises one massive arm and brings it down on a building 3 blocks away. The building collapses in a roar of concrete and glass. Captain Min screams at her squad to engage. Hit it with everything they've got. A dozen A-rankers and 3 S-rankers unleash their abilities on the Titan all at once. Fire, lightning, kinetic blasts, blades of condensed mana, and every single attack bounces off that bone armor like rain off a windshield. The Titan doesn't even slow down. Do-yun watches the attacks splash uselessly against its body and realizes what everyone else is already starting to understand. Conventional firepower isn't going to work on this thing. He lets his vision widen as far as it will go, pushes past the headache already building behind his eyes, and searches. The Titan's body is a fortress. No joints, no seams, no weak points anywhere on the surface. Its armor is a single continuous structure with no breaks or flaws. For one horrible second, Do-yun thinks he's found something his ability can't solve, and then he sees it. Buried deep inside the Titan's chest, behind 3 meters of bone armor, there's a core. It pulses with the same purple light as the breach, the same purple light as the Titan's empty eye sockets. Do-yun's vision paints it bright red, the brightest, clearest weak point he's ever seen. He shouts to Captain Min that he's got it. He says there's a core in its chest, the only weak point on the entire thing. Captain Min asks how the hell they're supposed to reach it through that armor. Do-yun doesn't answer. He's already running. He dodges a sweep of the Titan's arm that would have turned him into paste, rolls under its neck swing, and sprints straight toward its left leg. The armor plates are enormous, but they're not perfectly flush. Do-yun's vision shows him the micro-scale gaps between them, the hairline fractures where stress accumulates, the exact angle he needs to climb. He jumps. His fingers catch the edge of a plate, and he hauls himself up, finding footholds in places no one else could see. Climbing the Titan's body like it's a rock wall with handholds already marked. The Titan notices him. It twists, reaches for him with one massive hand, but Do-yun is already past its shoulder and climbing higher, higher. Every muscle in his body screaming. Captain Min is shouting something, but he can't hear her over the roar of his own heartbeat. He reaches the Titan's chest and stops. The core is right in front of him now, separated from his fist by 3 meters of bone armor that has no cracks, no seams, no structural weaknesses at all. Do-yun stares at it and realizes the truth his ability has been trying to tell him since he first laid eyes on the Titan. He can't break the armor. Not with a sword, not with a spell, not with anything in the squad's arsenal. But the armor has one weak point. It exists to protect the core. Without the core, the armor doesn't form. And the core is already exposed from the inside. Do-yun draws his fist back and drives it forward, not into the armor, but through the exact spot where the core's energy bleeds outward. One microscopic channel where the protective shell opens to vent the pressure building inside. His fist doesn't shatter the armor. It passes through it like the armor isn't there. His knuckles connect with the core. The Titan screams, a sound that isn't a sound, a vibration that rattles Do-yun's teeth and blurs his vision, and makes every awakener within 100 meters drop to their knees clutching their ears. The core cracks. Purple light explodes out of it in a shockwave that throws Do-yun off the Titan's chest and sends him tumbling through open air. He hits the ground hard enough to knock the wind out of him and rolls, gasping, as the Titan topples backward with a crash that shakes the entire district. The core detonates. The explosion tears a crater in the intersection 20 meters wide and sends chunks of bone armor raining down across 3 city blocks. Do-yun pushes himself up onto his elbows, coughing dust and blood, and stares at the hole where the Titan used to stand. The breach is closing. The monsters still on the street are collapsing, dissolving into purple mist as whatever force was holding them together dissipates. Captain Min is running toward him, shouting his name, her scarred face split in a grin of pure adrenaline. And beneath the crater, revealed by the explosion that just leveled half an intersection, Do-yun sees it. A chamber. Walls of dark metal, not concrete. Wires and conduits running along the ceiling, still sparking with residual energy. Expect control panel of some kind, its screen cracked but still flickering. This dungeon wasn't natural. It was built and buried under the streets of Seoul, where no one would ever find it unless something ripped the ground wide open. Do-yun stares at the hidden chamber and thinks of Director Yoon. He thinks of the white-blue light pulsing in the man's chest. He thinks of Baek Hyun-woo's warning ringing in his ears. The association is not what it seems. He pulls himself to his feet, blood dripping from a cut above his eye, and looks at Captain Min. He asks if she's seeing what he's seeing. Captain Min's grin fades as she follows his gaze to the metal chamber below the crater. She says she's seeing it. She says she wishes she wasn't. The chapter ends with Do-yun standing at the edge of the crater, staring down into a secret that was never supposed to surface. Knowing with absolute certainty that someone in the association put it there, and knowing that someone is going to come looking for whoever found it, he crouches at the edge of the crater and drops down. The impact jolts up through his knees, but he's already moving. The chamber walls are smooth, dark metal, seamless except for the conduits. Wires run along the ceiling in bundles thick as his arm. Most of them are dead, but a few still spit sparks into the gloom. He lands on a grated floor, and the whole thing shudders under his weight. Captain Min calls down, asking if he's lost his mind. He tells her to keep the perimeter secure and not let anyone near the crater. She doesn't like it, but she nods, and her scar twists in the half-light. Do-yun turns back to the chamber and lets his vision shift. The world bleeds red. Weak points bloom across every surface, hairline fractures in the metal, stress points where the welds are failing, a seam running along the far wall that someone tried to hide but couldn't. Not couldn't. Didn't expect anyone to find. He follows the seam to a control panel set flush against the wall. The screen is cracked but still flickering, cycling through lines of text he can't read. It's not Korean. It's not any language he's ever seen. His eye doesn't need to read it. The panel has a weak point right where the casing meets the wall. A structural gap so narrow you'd miss it if you weren't looking for it. Do-yun jams his fingers into the gap and pries. The casing pops off with a shriek of torn metal. Behind it is a mess of circuitry, data ports, and a single drive still blinking green. Still active, still recording. He rips it out and shoves it into his pocket. Captain Min's voice echoes down from above, tighter now. She says association reinforcements just arrived. She says they're not from her chain of command. Do-yun takes one last look around the chamber and sees them. Rows of empty pods lining the far wall, half hidden behind a collapsed support beam. Each one is big enough to hold a human body. Each one is wired into the same power grid as the control panel. The Titan didn't just emerge here, it was grown here. The association didn't just know about this dungeon. They built it. He climbs out of the crater with the drive burning a hole in his pocket. Captain Min is arguing with a man in an association uniform Do-yun doesn't recognize. The man's insignia marks him as internal affairs. He's got 4 agents behind him, all armed, all watching Do-yun like he just walked out of a crime scene, which technically he did. The internal affairs man asks what he found down there. Do-yun says nothing. The man's eyes narrow. Captain Min steps between them and says the site is still active and needs to be quarantined. The internal affairs man says his orders come directly from Director Yoon's office. Do-yun's blood goes cold. He doesn't let it show on his face. He tells the man the chamber is unstable, and the structural damage from the explosion could cause a secondary collapse at any moment. It's not even a lie. His vision is still showing him stress fractures spreading through the crater walls like cracks in ice. The internal affairs man hesitates. Captain Min doesn't give him time to think. She starts barking orders, pulling her squad into a cordon, treating the IA agents like obstacles to work around. By the time the man regains his footing, Do-yun is already walking toward the evacuation point. He doesn't run. Running would be a confession. He walks. The drive in his pocket feels heavier than it should. He finds Baek at a rooftop training ground on the 42nd floor of Titan headquarters. The old man is alone, going through slow forms with a wooden practice sword, moonlight glinting off the sweat on his scarred shoulders. He doesn't turn around when Do-yun lands on the rooftop. He just asks if the kid finally got some sleep. Do-yun tosses him the drive. Baek catches it without looking. Now he turns. Do-yun tells him everything. The dungeon break, the Titan, the core, the explosion, the hidden chamber under the crater, the pods, the control panel. The internal affairs team that showed up 15 minutes after the breach closed, carrying orders from Director Yoon's office. Baek's face doesn't change while he listens. It doesn't change when Do-yun finishes either. He just stands there, turning the drive over in his fingers, the green light blinking against his calloused palm. Finally, he speaks. He says he always suspected, but he never had proof. Do-yun asks what he suspected. Baek tells him to sit down. He tells him a story he's never told anyone. 10 years ago, when Baek was still an active S rank, his team was sent into a dungeon that wasn't on any map. It was a special assignment, classified, authorized by the director's office personally. The dungeon was wrong from the start. Monsters didn't behave like normal dungeon spawn. They fought like they were trained, like they were waiting. Half his team died before they reached the core chamber. And when they got there, they found it. A control room, just like the one Do-yun described. Metal walls, conduits, pods. But this one was still running, still active. Baek says he saw something in the center of that room. Something that wasn't a monster, and wasn't human, and wasn't supposed to exist at all. He doesn't describe it. His hand moves to the scars on his chest, the ones that never fully healed. The ones Do-yun's vision had mapped as golden structural damage woven through his entire body. The thing spoke to him. It told him the truth. The dungeons weren't natural disasters. They were infrastructure. Someone was building them. Someone was seeding monsters into the world like crops. Someone was using the Awakeners as a containment force, a buffer, a distraction from what was really happening underground. Do-yun asks who. Baek says he never got a name. After his team died, the association declared the dungeon cleared and sealed the records. They promoted Baek to a desk job and told him to keep his mouth shut. He's been watching ever since, waiting for proof. He holds up the drive. Now he has it. Do-yun's vision flickers. He's not trying to activate it, but the omniscient eye doesn't care what he wants anymore. It shows him the drive's weak point, a data encryption that can be cracked if you know where to apply pressure. It shows him Baek's weak points, the old wounds, the guilt, the fury he's been holding in for a decade. And it shows him something else. Faint, flickering light in the corner of his vision, coming from the drive itself. Not a weak point, a signature. Like the white-blue pulse he saw in Director Yoon's chest. The same color, the same rhythm. The drive isn't just recording data. It's connected to something. Still transmitting. Do-yun grabs the drive out of Baek's hand and hurls it off the rooftop. Baek doesn't ask why. He trusts the boy's instincts. Drive arcs through the night air, a tiny green star falling 42 stories, and before it hits the ground, it detonates. The explosion rips a hole in the parking lot below and shatters windows for 3 blocks. If Do-yun had held onto it for 5 more minutes, he'd be dead. If Baek had taken it inside, half of Titan headquarters would be gone. They stand at the edge of the rooftop, watching the fire bloom below. And neither of them speaks for a long time. Finally, Do-yun says it. He says the system is the enemy. Not Director Yoon, not the association, not even whoever is building the dungeons. Those are just pieces on the board. The system is the board. The system decides who gets power and who doesn't. The system ranks people, sorts them, sends them into dungeons to die or survive or come back changed. The system was here before the first dungeon opened, and it'll be here after the last one closes, unless someone finds a way to stop it. He asks if Do-yun understands what he's saying. Do-yun says he understands. He says he's been seeing weak points in things that shouldn't have them. In rules, in systems, in the way power moves through the world. His omniscient eye doesn't just see cracks in armor, it sees cracks in everything, including the thing that gave him the eye in the first place. Baek is quiet. Then he laughs. It's not a happy laugh. He says he spent 10 years looking for a weapon. Turns out he was training one. The sun is coming up over Seoul when Do-yun finally leaves the rooftop. He's got no drive, no proof, and a target painted on his back by an enemy he can't see. But he's got something better. He knows the truth now, and the truth has weak points, just like everything else. He's barely hit street level when his phone buzzes. It's a message from an unknown number. The message says, Cha Min-jae is looking for him. It says Min-jae has been asking questions about the Gangnam dungeon break. It says Min-jae's brother died in a breach 3 years ago. A breach Do-yun's old party was assigned to monitor. A breach Do-yun could have stopped if he'd been stronger. Min-jae doesn't know about the omniscient eye. He just knows Do-yun was there. He just knows Do-yun survived while his brother didn't. And now he's standing in the middle of Titan's main lobby, waiting. Do-yun walks through the front doors and the room goes quiet. Cha Min-jae is exactly what his file said he'd be. Tall, built like a boxer, with a face that hasn't smiled in 3 years. His nullification field is already active. Do-yun can feel it the second he steps within 10 meters, a dead zone where his omniscient eye flickers and dims. The weak points he's been seeing on everything since the rooftop start to fade. Min-jae's power doesn't just block abilities, it smothers them. He turns to face Do-yun, and his voice carries across the silent lobby. He asks if Do-yun knows who he is. Do-yun says he knows. Min-jae says his brother's name was Cha Ha-jun. He says Ha-jun was an A-rank awakener with a wife and a daughter, and a whole life ahead of him. He says Ha-jun died in a dungeon breach that Do-yun's party was supposed to have locked down. He says Do-yun was there, and he did nothing. Do-yun doesn't argue. He doesn't defend himself. He just asks what Min-jae wants. Min-jae says he wants a public duel tomorrow at the Central Arena, with every guild in Seoul watching. He wants to prove that Do-yun's S-class promotion is a fraud. He wants to break Do-yun in front of the same system that let his brother die. Do-yun looks at Min-jae's face, at the grief and the fury, and the absolute certainty of a man who has been waiting 3 years for someone to blame. He can't use his eye to find a weak point in that. Min-jae's field is already pressing down on him, snuffing out the red glow he's come to rely on. Without the omniscient eye, Do-yun is just a former E rank with mediocre physicals and a cheap dagger that already broke. But he doesn't say no. He says yes. Min-jae stares at him like he expected a fight, an argument, some excuse to escalate right here in the lobby. Do-yun just nods once and walks past him toward the elevator. Captain Min is waiting for him when the doors close. She asks if he's lost his mind. Do-yun says probably. She asks how he plans to win a duel against a nullifier without his ability. Do-yun looks at his reflection in the elevator's steel walls. His face is tired. His knuckles are still raw from punching through the Titan's core. His vision is dark. No red, no gold, just the ordinary world looking back at him. He says he'll figure it out. The elevator doors open on the training floor, and Baek is already there, holding 2 wooden practice swords. He heard about Min-jae's challenge before Do-yun even left the lobby. He tosses one of the swords to Do-yun and says they've got 24 hours to teach a blind man how to fight. Do-yun catches the sword. It feels heavier than it should. Baek activates the training room's suppression field, a pale imitation of Min-jae's nullification, but close enough to simulate the dead zone Do-yun will be fighting in tomorrow. Do-yun's vision goes completely dark. No red, no gold, no weak points. Just Baek's sword coming at his face, and his own reflexes screaming at him to dodge. He doesn't dodge fast enough. The wooden blade cracks against his ribs, and he stumbles, gasping, his whole side on fire. Baek tells him to get up. He says Min-jae won't give him time to catch his breath. He says Min-jae has been training for 3 years with nothing but revenge in his heart. He says Do-yun has 24 hours to learn what Min-jae already knows. How to fight when the world doesn't give you any shortcuts. Do-yun gets up. Baek hits him again. He gets up. Baek hits him a 3rd time, and this time Do-yun doesn't just take it. He steps inside the swing, closes the distance, and drives his shoulder into Baek's chest. It's not a weak point. It's just physics. A body moving faster than another body can react. Baek stumbles back half a step, and something flickers in his eyes. Not surprise. Respect. He says maybe the kid isn't completely hopeless. Then he attacks for real. The next 20 hours are a blur of bruises and exhaustion, and Baek's voice drilling into him again and again. The nullification field means Do-yun can't see weak points, but it doesn't mean weak points stop existing. They're still there. He just has to find them the hard way. Baek teaches him to read bodies instead of glowing spots. A shoulder that dips before a swing. A hip that shifts before a kick. A foot that plants too hard before a lunge. Every movement has a tell, and every tell is a weak point if you know how to look. Do-yun doesn't sleep. He trains until his arms shake and his vision blurs, and Baek finally calls it. They've done what they can. The rest is up to him. The central arena is packed. Every guild in Seoul sent representatives, and the bleachers are a sea of insignias and murmuring voices. Do-yun walks out onto the arena floor, and the crowd goes quiet. Min-jae is already there, waiting in the center of the ring, his nullification field fully active. The moment Do-yun steps into range, his vision dies. No omniscient eye. No weak points. Just his opponent and the roar of blood in his ears. The referee raises his hand. The crowd holds its breath. Min-jae's fists are already glowing with stored kinetic energy, a secondary ability that doesn't need the nullification field to work. He's been saving it for this fight, for this moment. The hand drops. Min-jae moves like a freight train. Do-yun's world narrows to a single point. Survive. Adapt. Find something his eye would have handed him in half a second. Min-jae's first punch misses his jaw by a hair. The second catches his shoulder and spins him halfway around. Do-yun hits the ground hard, rolls, comes up gasping. The crowd roars. Min-jae doesn't gloat. He just keeps coming. And somewhere in the chaos of dodging and blocking and getting hit more times than he can count, Do-yun starts to see it. Not with his eye. With everything Baek taught him. The rhythm of Min-jae's attacks. The pattern. The one place his guard always drops a fraction of a second too late. It's just a mistake, but it's enough. Do-yun's ribs scream every time he breathes. Min-jae doesn't give him a second to recover. The nullification field hums like a living thing, pressing down on his skull, smothering the omniscient eye completely. No red, no gold, just the flat gray of the arena and Min-jae's fists coming at his face. Do-yun ducks the first swing. The second catches his forearm, and he feels the bone flex. The crowd is a wall of noise he can't afford to hear. He backpedals, boots scraping against the arena floor, and Min-jae follows like a wolf on a wounded deer. Every attack is chained, practiced, merciless. Min-jae has been training for this fight for 3 years. Do-yun has been training for 20 hours. 20 hours with Baek is worth more than 3 years of rage. Baek's voice cuts through the pain in his head. A shoulder that dips before a swing. A hip that shifts before a kick. A foot that plants too hard before a lunge. Min-jae plants his lead foot an inch too deep before the next hook. It's not a weak point. It's just physics. A body committing too hard to a trajectory it can't change. Do-yun doesn't dodge. He steps inside the hook, closes the distance, and drives his elbow into Min-jae's throat. It's the first clean hit he's landed all fight. Min-jae chokes, stumbling back, his eyes wide with shock. The crowd goes silent for half a heartbeat. Then they erupt. Do-yun doesn't press the advantage. He resets his stance, arms shaking, breath coming in ragged gasps. Min-jae touches his throat. His expression shifts from shock to something colder, something deadlier. He says Do-yun's little trick won't work twice. And then he comes again, faster, harder. His fists blur with stored kinetic energy, each punch carrying enough force to shatter concrete. Do-yun can't block them. He can only redirect, deflect, survive. The arena floor cracks under a missed stomp. Do-yun's shoulder catches a glancing blow and goes numb from the impact. He rolls, comes up, and something in his vision flickers. Not the omniscient eye, something older, something animal. Survival instinct honed by 20 hours of Baek beating it into him. Min-jae's pattern isn't random. It's a rhythm. 3 fast strikes, a half-beat pause, then the heavy finisher. Always the same rhythm, always the same finisher. And in that half-beat pause, Min-jae drops his guard. Just a fraction. Just enough. Do-yun waits. He takes the 3 fast strikes on his already bruised arms, each one a firework of pain. Then the pause. And Do-yun moves. He doesn't strike. He steps into Min-jae's guard and wraps his arms around him, pinning his elbows to his sides. It's not a technique Baek taught him. It's just something desperate and stupid, and the only thing he has left. Min-jae snarls at him to get off. His knee comes up, catching Do-yun in the stomach, but Do-yun doesn't let go. The nullification field is strongest at close range. It's a dead zone where abilities crumble, and only raw physicality matters. And right now, Do-yun is pressed against the source of that field. He can feel it pulsing. A pressure behind his eyes that isn't quite pain, but isn't quite anything else either. Not with his eye, with his body. The nullification field isn't infinite. It has a rhythm, just like Min-jae's attacks. A pulse, a heartbeat, and every pulse has a gap. Min-jae wrenches one arm free and drives an elbow into Do-yun's spine. Do-yun feels something crack. His grip loosens. The crowd screams, but he holds on just long enough to feel the rhythm complete itself. The pulse peaks. The field flares, and then, for one fraction of a second, it drops. Do-yun lets go of Min-jae and throws himself backward. The nullification field flickers. Not gone. Not broken, but straining. The edges of the dead zone wobble like a heat mirage. Min-jae's eyes go wide. He knows what Do-yun just did. He knows what happens next. He lunges forward, abandoning technique for raw aggression, trying to crush Do-yun before the field stabilizes. But Do-yun is already moving. He circles left, pushing the distance, forcing Min-jae to chase him. Every step pulls Min-jae's field a little thin. Every stride stretches the dead zone until it's a membrane instead of a wall. Min-jae's nullification has a weak point, not a physical one he can strike, a logical one he can strain. It can be overloaded. Do-yun stops retreating. He plants his feet and faces Min-jae head-on, arms loose at his sides. Min-jae hesitates. He doesn't know why Do-yun stopped running. It makes him cautious. It makes him slow. And that hesitation costs him. Do-yun steps forward, directly into the heart of the nullification field, and presses his forehead against Min-jae's. He tells Min-jae he can feel it. Field. The pulse. The moment between pulses where it has to reset. And he says Min-jae has been alone too long. He forgot that a person who understands his limits can become a terrible weapon. Min-jae screams and shoves him back. The field surges, trying to reassert dominance. But Do-yun is already circling again, forcing Min-jae to chase, forcing the field to stretch, forcing the pulse to come faster and faster. Every surge costs energy, every reset costs concentration, and Min-jae has been fighting at full intensity for minutes. The crowd can see it now. The way Min-jae's fists shake, the way his breathing hitches, the way the nullification field stutters like a dying light bulb. Somewhere in the bleachers, Beck is watching. He doesn't smile. He just nods. Captain Min is next to him, her burned hand gripping the railing so hard her knuckles have gone white. She mutters that the kid figured it out. Min-jae's field isn't a dead zone. It's a muscle. And every muscle gets tired. Min-jae realizes it too late. He lunges for one final desperate attack, throwing every ounce of stored kinetic energy into a single punch. The air cracks. The arena floor splinters in a line directly toward Do-yun. But Do-yun is already moving sideways. He's not trying to dodge the shockwave. He's aiming for the space behind Min-jae. The punch carries Min-jae forward, off balance, and his nullification field collapses. Not flickers, collapses. The dead zone dies. Min-jae stumbles, gasping, his own power turned against him by exhaustion and overextension. And suddenly, Do-yun's vision floods with color. Red blooms across Min-jae's body like a constellation of failure. Every joint, every tendon, every vulnerability laid bare. The omniscient eye is back. Do-yun doesn't strike. He stands over Min-jae, breathing hard. The glow of weak points painting his opponent in shades of mortal fragility. He could end this fight in one movement. The red spots on Min-jae's temple, his throat, his heart, all pulse with invitation. The crowd is holding its breath. The referee hasn't moved. Min-jae is on his knees, chest heaving, his nullification field gone, and his kinetic reserves empty. He looks up at Do-yun, and there's no fear in his eyes. Just exhaustion and something that might be relief. He says Do-yun won. So finish it. Do-yun presses his fist against Min-jae's sternum, right over a red spot that would stop his heart if struck with enough force. The omniscient eye tells him the exact angle, the exact pressure, the exact follow-through needed. Do-yun pulls his fist back, and he opens his hand. He doesn't hit Min-jae. He offers him a hand up. The arena is dead silent. Do-yun says he's not Min-jae's enemy. Min-jae stares at the offered hand like it's a trap. He asks what kind of game Do-yun is playing. Do-yun says Min-jae wanted revenge for his brother. He says he understands that. He says Ha-jun died in a dungeon 6 months ago because Do-yun froze, because he hesitated, because he was too weak to act when it mattered. He says he carries that weight every day. He sees Ha-jun's face in his dreams. He knows he can't bring him back, but he can make sure no one else dies because he hesitated. He says Min-jae has been training alone for 3 years with nothing but rage to keep him going. He asks what happens when the rage runs out. Min-jae's hands are shaking, not from exhaustion, from something else. Do-yun says he wants to protect people. All of them, even the ones who hate him. He says Min-jae's nullification is one of the most powerful abilities in the country. He says the system is the real enemy. Not him, not the association, not the guilds. He says the thing that killed Ha-jun wasn't a monster. It was a system that created monsters, that feeds on death, that built dungeons like factories and filled them with nightmares. For the first time, Min-jae's expression cracks. He asks what Do-yun means. Do-yun tells him about the chamber, the control room, the pods, the titan that was grown, not spawned. He says he doesn't have proof anymore. He destroyed the only evidence to survive. But he swears it's true. And he swears that if Min-jae wants to fight, he'll fight alongside him, not against him. Min-jae stares at him for a long, terrible moment. Then he takes Do-yun's hand. Do-yun pulls him to his feet, and the arena erupts, not in cheers, in confusion. Murmuring, shouting, the referee waving his arms. The duel is unresolved. The crowd doesn't know what just happened. Min-jae is standing, but his nullification field is gone, and he hasn't conceded. The referee asks Do-yun if he's withdrawing. Do-yun says he's withdrawing nothing. He says the duel is over because he's not fighting Min-jae anymore. He says he's recruiting him. That sends the arena into chaos. Min-jae looks at Do-yun like he's insane. He says Do-yun just spent 24 hours learning to survive him, and now he wants to recruit him. Do-yun shrugs. He says he needs people who can challenge him, people who can nullify him if he ever goes too far. He says Beck was training a weapon, but he doesn't want to be a weapon. He wants to be a shield. And shields need partners who can cover their blind spots. Min-jae doesn't answer. He just stares at Do-yun with an expression that's halfway between hatred and something else entirely. Then he turns and walks out of the arena. Do-yun watches him go. Beck finds him in the locker room an hour later. Do-yun is sitting on a bench, shirt off. ribs wrapped in healing tape that Do-yun left for him. His torso is a map of purple and black bruises. Beck stats Do-yun could have killed Min-jae. Do-yun says he knows. Beck asks why he didn't. Do-yun thinks about it for a moment. He says Min-jae lost his brother because Do-yun hesitated. If Do-yun kills him now, he's just proving that hesitation was the right choice, that the strong always destroy the weak. He says he's done with that. He's done being the person who freezes. Beck leans against the lockers. He looks tired, older than his scars. He says Do-yun's plan to recruit Min-jae is stupid. He says Min-jae has spent years nursing a grudge, and one speech in an arena won't undo that. But he says Do-yun did something today that he hasn't seen in a decade. He made someone question the story they've been telling themselves. That's more dangerous than any punch. Do-yun asks if that's a compliment. Beck says it's a warning. He says the system doesn't like people who break its narratives. Do-yun's phone buzzes. It's a message from an unknown number. 3 words. Han, Vipers, tonight. He shows it to Beck. Beck's face goes hard. He says the Vipers are a rogue guild. They don't operate in the open. They take hostages, sell intel, work as mercenaries for anyone who pays. And if they have Ji-hae, she's already running out of time. Do-yun pulls his shirt on. Every movement hurts. Every breath hurts more. He says he's going. Beck grabs his shoulder. The old man's grip is like iron. He says Do-yun can barely stand. He says the Vipers have at least 3 A-rank awakeners and a leader who specializes in psychic traps. He says Do-yun will die if he goes alone. Do-yun looks at Beck's hand on his shoulder. He looks at the scars on the old man's knuckles. He says he knows where the Viper's hideout is. He says Ji-hae is 12 years old, and she looks at him like he's a hero. He says if he doesn't go, she'll die believing heroes don't exist. He's not going to let that happen. Beck's grip tightens, then it loosens. He says he'll call Captain Min. He says Do-yun gets 1 hour of preparation. No more. Do-yun nods and limps toward the door. His omniscient eye is active again, painting the world in red and gold. Every weak point in the locker room glows. The hinges on the door. The stress fractures in the concrete. The old injury in Beck's left leg. He files it all away. Outside, the night air is cold, and Seoul's skyline glitters with lights that know nothing about kidnapped children or rogue guilds. Do-yun doesn't look back at the arena. He has an hour to find Ji-hae before the Vipers make their move. And when he finds them, they're going to learn what happens when a man who sees every weakness stops holding back. The Vipers' hideout is an old parking garage on the western edge of Incheon. It sits on a dead industrial strip, where the streetlights have been smashed for years. Do-yun crouches behind a rust and shipping container a block away. Captain Min is beside him, along with 2 Titan operatives she trusts. One is a sensor-type awakener, who maps the building's interior with pulses of sonar. The other is a stealth specialist, who has already shorted out the external cameras. The sensor-type whispers that there are 14 signatures inside. 3 are clustered on the 3rd floor, unmoving. One of them is tiny. Do-yun's jaw tightens until his teeth ache. Captain Min says the Vipers have 3 A-rank combatants. Their leader is a man named Kang Do-yun. His talent is a defensive barrier that can tank an S-rank strike. She says he has never been breached in combat. Do-yun says everything has a weak point. He activates his omniscient eye as he moves toward the garage. The world dissolves into red and gold. The garage's structural skeleton lights up like a wireframe. Stress fractures glow along the concrete pillars. Corroded rebar shows through the walls like exposed nerves. The entire building is a death trap waiting for a reason to fall. He files every weak point away and keeps moving. The first guard is stationed at the ground floor entrance. Do-yun's vision paints a crimson bloom at the base of the man's skull. He doesn't slow down. He crosses the open concrete in complete silence. The stealth specialist's dampening field wraps around him like a second skin. Do-yun's palm strikes the guard's weak point before the man knows he's there. The guard drops without a sound. 1 down. Captain Min's voice crackles in his earpiece. She says the second guard is patrolling the stairwell. Do-yun moves inside. The stairwell reeks of mildew and old motor oil. The guard is halfway up the first flight, back turned. His weak point glows at the juncture of his spine and shoulder. Do-yun takes 3 silent steps and strikes. The guard crumples. 2 down. The sonar operator warns that the remaining guards are converging. Someone must have tripped a silent alarm. Do-yun doesn't wait. He moves up the stairs 2 at a time. His bruised ribs scream with every step. The healing tape Do-yun left him is starting to peel. He ignores it all. 2 guards burst through the door at the 2nd floor landing. Do-yun sees their weak points before they see him. 1 at the temple, 1 behind the knee. He lunges forward and drops the first with an elbow strike. The second swings a baton at his head. Do-yun ducks under it and drives his knuckles into the back of the man's knee. The guard's leg buckles and he goes down hard. 4 down, 10 signatures left. Do-yun reaches the 3rd floor. The corridor ahead is dark, lit only by a single flickering fluorescent tube. At the far end is a heavy steel door. His omniscient eye shows him the weak points on the hinges. It also shows him the pressure plate hidden under the concrete floor. He stops at the edge of the trigger zone. Captain Min asks what he's waiting for. Do-yun tells her about the trap. He says the floor is rigged to collapse if he steps on it wrong. The stealth specialist asks if they should abort. Do-yun says no. He says the trap has a weak point too. He studies the pressure plate's mechanism. Trigger is linked to a tension cable running through the wall. If the cable is severed, the trap disarms. Do-yun pulls his cheap dagger from his belt. It is still slick with dried goblin blood from the dungeon. He drives the blade into the wall where the cable runs. The dagger snaps at the hilt. But the cable is severed. The pressure plate goes dead. He kicks the steel door open. The room beyond is a nightmare. Ji-hye is strapped to a metal chair in the center of the space. Tubes run from her arms into a machine that hums with a sickly green light. Her face is pale, and her eyes are closed. She looks so small, so fragile. Kang Tae-shik stands behind her, one hand resting on the machine. He is a tall man with hollow cheeks and eyes that hold no warmth. His barrier is already active, shimmering around him like a heat haze. 2 more guards flank him. Her weak points glow bright red in Do-yun's vision. Tae-shik smiles. He says he was wondering when someone would come for the girl. He says the association normally writes off hostages after 48 hours. He asks what makes this one so special. Do-yun doesn't answer. He is counting the weak points in the machine. The machine has 3. 1 at the power coupling, 1 at the output regulator, 1 at the emergency shutoff. If he hits the wrong one, the machine will surge and kill Ji-hye. If he hits the right one, it will power down safely. The emergency shutoff is at the back of the machine, behind Tae-shik, behind his unbreakable barrier. Do-yun starts walking forward. Tae-shik's smile fades. He tells the guards to kill the intruder. They charge. Do-yun sees the first guard's weak point at the solar plexus. He steps inside the man's reach and drives his fist into the glowing spot. The guard folds like wet cardboard. Second guard has a weak point at the ankle. Do-yun stomps down hard. Bone crunches. The guard screams and drops his weapon. Do-yun kicks the gun across the room and keeps walking. Tae-shik's expression shifts. Not fear, interest. He says Do-yun moves like an S rank. He asks what his talent is. Do-yun says it's called taking back what was stolen. Tae-shik laughs. He says his barrier has stopped S-rank attacks before. He says Do-yun will break his hands on it before he ever touches the machine. Do-yun studies the barrier. It is a dome of compressed air, molecules locked so tight that nothing gets through. His omniscient eye shows him the truth. The barrier is not uniform. There is a fluctuation, a hairline crack in the molecular lattice that shifts position every 3 seconds. It is not a flaw in the barrier. It is a flaw in Tae-shik's control. The man can't hold perfect compression for more than 3 seconds at a time. Do-yun waits. Tae-shik taunts him. He calls him a fool. He says the girl's life force is draining with every second he wastes. The machine hums louder. Ji-hye's breathing grows shallower. Do-yun counts the rhythm of the flaw. 3 seconds stable, a half-second gap. 3 seconds stable, a half-second gap. He remembers Min-jae's nullification field. The same principle. Every defense has a rhythm. Every rhythm has a gap. The gap shifts again. Do-yun moves. He doesn't hit the barrier head-on. He strikes at the exact moment of flux. His fist passes through the molecular lattice like it isn't there. He drives his knuckles into the emergency shutoff switch. The machine's hum stutters and dies. The green light fades. The tubes stop draining. Ji-hye gasps. Her eyes flutter open. Tae-shik stares at the shutoff switch. His expression is blank with disbelief. He says that's impossible. He says no one has ever breached his barrier. Do-yun straightens up. His bruised ribs are on fire. His shoulder is numb. His hands are raw and bleeding. He says every barrier has a crack. He just knows where to look. Tae-shik's face twists with rage. He drops the barrier and lunges at Do-yun with a blade drawn from his sleeve. Do-yun sees the weak point on Tae-shik's wrist. He catches the man's arm mid-thrust and twists. The blade clatters to the floor. Do-yun drives his forehead into Tae-shik's nose. The guild leader staggers backward. Blood pours down his face. Do-yun doesn't stop. He hits the weak point at Tae-shik's knee. The man goes down. He hits the weak point at his shoulder. The arm goes limp. He hits the weak point at his jaw. Tae-shik's eyes roll back and he collapses. It is over. Captain Min's team floods the room. The stealth specialist cuts Ji-hae's restraints. The sensor type checks her vitals and reports that she is stable but weak. Do-yun kneels beside her. Her eyes focus on him. She asks if he came to save her. Her voice is barely a whisper. Do-yun says of course he did. He says he told her he would always come. She smiles. It is the smallest smile he has ever seen. Then her eyes close and she goes limp. The sensor type says she has passed out from exhaustion. Captain Min orders an immediate medical evac. Do-yun stays on his knees beside the chair. His hands are shaking. Not from fear, from rage. He looks at the machine that was draining Ji-hae. His omniscient eye is still active. It shows him the components, the power source, the output cables, and something else. A small metal plate on the back of the machine, stamped with a golden scale emblem, symbol of the Korean Awakener Association. Do-yun's blood goes cold. Captain Min sees it too. Her scar twists as her jaw clenches. She says they need to get out of here. She says they can analyze the machine later. Do-yun says no. He says this is proof. Proof that the association supplied the Vipers. Captain Min says it's not enough. A stamped plate can be forged. A machine can be stolen. Without a paper trail, it means nothing. Do-yun knows she is right. He hates that she is right. The building groans. Do-yun's vision flares. The structural weak points he mapped earlier are spreading. The severed cable from the trap must have destabilized something critical. A support pillar on the floor below cracks with a sound like thunder. Captain Min shouts for everyone to evacuate. Do-yun scoops Ji-hae into his arms. She weighs almost nothing. He runs. The parking garage collapses behind them in a roar of concrete and twisted steel. Dust billows into the night sky. The Viper's hideout is a pile of rubble. Do-yun doesn't look back. He carries Ji-hae to the evac van. A medical team takes her from his arms. They hook her to monitors and start fluids. Her color is already improving. Do-yun leans against the van. His legs finally give out. He slides down until he is sitting on the cold asphalt. Every part of him hurts. Captain Min stands over him. She says he did good work tonight. She says Ji-hae is alive because of him. Do-yun asks if the association sent the Vipers the machine. Captain Min is silent for a long moment. Then she says she doesn't know. She says there are factions within the association, people who answer to different masters. She says Director Yoon might not even know what his subordinates are doing. Do-yun says that isn't good enough. Captain Min crouches down. Her burn scar catches the van's headlights. She says he needs to decide what kind of operative he wants to be. The kind who breaks things, or the kind who builds things. She says breaking is faster, but building lasts. She walks away before he can answer. Do-yun sits in the cold and watches the medical team work on Ji-hae. His omniscient eye finally dims as exhaustion overtakes him. The last thing he sees before his vision goes dark is the faint white-blue glow of her life force pulsing steady and strong. She is going to live. The next morning, Do-yun wakes in a medical bay. Seo-yeon is there. Her face is pale and her hands are trembling. She says she healed him while he was unconscious. She says his ribs were cracked and his shoulder was dislocated. She says he almost died. Do-yun sits up. His body protests but holds. He says he had to save Ji-hae. So-yeon slaps him. It is not hard. She doesn't have the strength, but her eyes are wet with tears. She says he can't keep doing this. She says he can't keep breaking himself for everyone else. She says she can't keep healing him if he won't stop getting hurt. Do-yun says he doesn't have a choice. So-yeon says he does. She says he has people who want to help him. She says she wants to help him. But she can't if he keeps running into danger alone. Do-yun looks at her, really looks at her. She is so tired. She has been healing him for days, pushing past her own limits, burning herself out to keep him alive. He says he is sorry. Seo-yeon's tears spill over. She says she doesn't want him to be sorry. She wants him to be smart. She wants him to let people stand beside him. Do-yun takes her hand. He says he will try. So-yeon wipes her eyes. She says that's all she asks. Ji-hae is sitting up in another bed across the room. She is eating soup and watching them. Her eyes are bright and curious. She asks if So-yeon is Do-yun's girlfriend. So-yeon's face turns bright red. Do-yun coughs and says no. He says So-yeon is his friend. Ji-hae says okay. Then she asks if she can become strong like Do-yun. She says she wants to protect people too. Do-yun looks at her small hands wrapped around the soup bowl. He thinks about the machine that drained her, about the golden scale emblem stamped on its back, about the system that built dungeons like factories and filled them with nightmares. He says she can be strong. He says she can be stronger than him, but she has to promise to let people help her, to never fight alone. Ji-hye nods. Her expression is deadly serious. She says she promises. Baek appears in the doorway. He looks at Do-yun, at the healing tape wrapped around his torso, at the purple bruises that still haven't faded. He says Do-yun looks like garbage. Do-yun says he feels like garbage. Baek tosses a folder onto Do-yun's bed. He says it's a mission briefing. A high-level dungeon has appeared in the mountains north of Seoul. It is bigger than anything the association has seen in 5 years. He is leading the raid. He says he wants Do-yun on his squad. Do-yun picks up the folder. His hands are still raw, still shaking slightly. He asks when they leave. Baek says tomorrow at dawn. He says Do-yun should rest. He says he will need every ounce of strength he has. Do-yun opens the folder. The dungeon classification is S rank. The estimated monster density is catastrophic. The survival rate for the last squad that attempted it is 0. He closes the folder. He says he will be ready. Baek nods once. Then he leaves. So-yeon is watching Do-yun. Her expression is unreadable. She says she is coming too. Do-yun starts to argue. She cuts him off. She says if he is going into an S-rank dungeon, he needs a healer. She says she has been training. She says she is stronger now. Do-yun looks at her trembling hands, at the dark circles under her eyes. He says, okay. So-yeon blinks. She was ready for a fight. Do-yun says he meant what he said. He will try to let people stand beside him, starting with her. So-yeon's face does something complicated. Then she nods. Ji-hye slurps her soup loudly. She says this is getting boring, and asks if anyone has a phone she can borrow. Do-yun laughs. It hurts his ribs. He doesn't care. Baek and Do-yun step through the gate together. The S-rank dungeon opens around them like a wound in the world. The sky is the color of a fresh bruise, and the ground is jagged black glass that crunches under every step. Cold wind howls through crystalline formations that jut out of the earth at wrong angles. Do-yun has never seen anything like it. This isn't a cave system, or a ruins complex, or any of the standard dungeon templates the association catalogs in its manuals. This is something else entirely. A landscape designed by a mind that hates symmetry. Baek moves forward without hesitation. His sword is already drawn, and the blade catches the sickly purple light and throws it back in fragments. He says the previous squad never made it past the first chamber. He says the association sent 12 A-rankers, and none of them came back. Do-yun counts 23 Titan operatives, moving in formation behind them. Captain Min is on the left flank with her barrier up and her jaw set. So-yeon is near the rear with 2 other healers, and her face is already pale with concentration. The dungeon's ambient pressure feels like a hand pressing down on Do-yun's skull. His omniscient eye activates automatically, and the world dissolves into a web of red lines and pulsing points. Every surface has a fracture somewhere. Every shadow hides a seam. The problem is that there are too many. Hundreds of weak points spread across the alien landscape, and Do-yun can't process them all at once. He forces the vision to narrow and focuses on the path ahead. Baek glances back at him. He asks if Do-yun sees anything. Do-yun says everything has a crack in it. He says the whole dungeon feels like it was assembled wrong. Baek's mouth tightens. He says that matches the reports from 10 years ago. The squad advances for 20 minutes without contact. The silence is worse than any ambush. Then the ground splits open. It happens without warning. One moment they're walking across the black glass, and the next there's a chasm yawning beneath them, and things are pouring out of it. Not goblins, not orcs or trolls or any of the standard monster templates. The things that crawl out of the chasm are shaped like human nightmares. Too many limbs and too many joints and skin that shifts color as Do-yun watches. His omniscient eye flares crimson, and every single creature lights up with weak points. But the weak points are moving. They slide across the bodies like oil on water, and they don't stay still long enough for anyone to target them. Baek shouts for the squad to form up. Captain Min's barrier expands into a dome that covers the healers and the support types. The front line engages, and it goes bad immediately. First wave hits with speed that shouldn't be possible for things that size. An operative named Jin goes down screaming, and his chest is open before he touches the ground. Another operative loses an arm at the elbow, and the blood spray paints the black glass red. Do-yun moves. His body remembers Baek's training, and he slips past a grasping limb and drives his blade into a joint that his eye marks as vulnerable. The creature shrieks and collapses, But the weak point has already shifted by the time he pulls his sword free. He has to track each target individually. He has to wait for the red glow to stabilize. And the things are fast. Faster than the goblins, and faster than the Viper's guards, and faster than anything Do-yun has fought before. Baek is everywhere at once. The old S-rank moves like a thunderstorm, and his sword cuts through 3 creatures in a single arc. Calls out formations and tactical adjustments without pausing his assault. He is magnificent. He is the reason the squad is still alive. And Do-yun can already see that it isn't enough. The chasm keeps vomiting more creatures, and the squad is getting pushed back toward a ridge of jagged crystal. Seo-yeon's healing light flickers across the formation, and Do-yun sees her stumble. She is burning through her reserves too fast. Captain Min's barrier cracks under a concentrated assault, and she screams through gritted teeth and forces it back together. The creatures surge forward in a coordinated wave, and the front line breaks. Not all at once. Not dramatically, just a slow, grinding collapse as exhausted operatives get pulled down and replaced too slowly. Do-yun kills and kills and kills. His sword arm is numb, and his lungs burn, and the red lines in his vision blur together into a single, endless pulse of threat. Then the chasm stops producing smaller creatures, and the leader emerges. It's bigger than the rest, and its body is a shifting mass of interlocking plates that slide over each other like tectonic armor, and it's wrapped around something. A core of pale white-blue light that Do-yun recognizes immediately. The same light he saw in Director Yoon's chest. The same light that pulsed through the machine that drained Ji-hae, the system's energy. Living inside this monster's heart, his omniscient eye locks onto it. The weak point of the leader is the core itself, and it's protected by layers of shifting armor that open and close in a rhythm. He can see the timing. He can see exactly when to strike. And he also sees what happens if he hits it. The core will rupture. The energy release will be catastrophic, and the blast radius will cover half the ridge. The squad is still engaged with the smaller creatures, and they're too close, and there's no time to evacuate them. Do-yun hesitates. 2 seconds is all it takes. The leader lunges. Not at Do-yun, at Baek. Baek sends it coming, and he raises his sword, and his expression is perfectly calm. He knows he can't block it, and he's already made peace with that. The shifting plates open, and the creature's primary limb spears through Baek's chest. It comes out his back in a spray of crimson, and Baek's sword clatters to the black glass. Do-yun screams. He doesn't hear himself do it, feels his throat tear, and his legs are already moving before his brain catches up. Baek is still alive when Do-yun reaches him. The old man's eyes are clear and focused, and there's blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth. He says Do-yun's name. He says he knew this was coming. He says the chamber 10 years ago, and the scars he carried, and the years of waiting were all for this moment. He says Do-yun is the weapon. He says Do-yun must not hesitate again. Then the light goes out of Baek Hyun-woo's eyes, and Do-yun is holding a dead man. The rage that hits him is not rational, and it's not tactical, and it's not the kind of emotion Baek trained him to control. It's a tidal wave of pure, undiluted fury that burns through every nerve in his body. His omniscient eye goes berserk. The world dissolves into a solid field of red, and every creature in his line of sight lights up with weak points that burn like stars. The smaller ones first. He moves through them like a blade through rotten silk, and his sword finds throats and joints and soft tissue with mechanical precision. 1 and 2 and 3 and 7, and he stops counting. The leader turns toward him, and the shifting armor plates accelerate their rhythm. The core pulses faster, and the white-blue light intensifies. Do-yun doesn't wait for the timing window. He runs directly at the thing. A limb comes at him and he ducks under it, and the wind of its passage tears the skin on his cheek. Another limb and he vaults over it, using the momentum to close the distance. The armor plates shift, and the core is exposed for half a second. Do-yun throws his sword. Not at the core. At the joint where the plates converge at the creature's shoulder. The blade sinks into the hilt, and the armor seizes. The core stays exposed. Do-yun closes the remaining distance on foot, and he has no weapon left, so he uses his fist. His hand plunges into the white-blue light, and he feels something shatter. The creature screams. The sound is high and thin, and it rattles Do-yun's teeth in their socket. Then the core goes dark, and the shifting plates stop moving, and the leader collapses into a heap of inert biomass. The smaller creatures drop too. Every single one of them goes limp simultaneously, like puppets with their strings cut. The silence that follows is absolute. Do-yun stands over the leader's corpse, with his arm buried in its chest, and his breath coming in ragged gasps. His hand is burned. The skin is blackened and cracked, and he can see the white of bone showing through in places. He doesn't feel it yet. He pulls his arm free and turns back toward the ridge. So-yeon is already running toward him. Her healing light envelops his hand before she even reaches him, and the pain finally registers. It's searing and immediate, and Do-yun's knees buckle. He goes down hard, and the black glass cuts into his palms. So-yeon catches him before he hits the ground completely, and she lowers him onto his side. Her face is streaked with tears, and she's saying something, but Do-yun can't hear her. The roar of his own pulse is too loud. He looks past her, past the ridge and the bodies and the black glass. Beck's body is still there. Captain Min is beside it, and she's closed his eyes. Do-yun tries to get up, and So-yeon pushes him back down with strength that surprises them both. She tells him to stay still. She says his hand is destroyed, and she needs to focus. Do-yun says Beck is dead. He says it's his fault. He says he hesitated, and Beck paid for it. So-yeon doesn't argue with him. She doesn't tell him it wasn't his fault, or that he did everything he could. She just keeps healing, and her tears keep falling, and the light around Do-yun's hand slowly knits the burned flesh back together. The medical evac team arrives 12 minutes later. They're from the association, but Do-yun doesn't register their faces or their names or the questions they ask him. He is somewhere else entirely. He is back in the dungeon with the weak point burning in the leader's chest and his feet frozen to the black glass. He is hearing Beck's voice telling him not to hesitate. He is watching the old man die for the second time, and the third time, and the 100th time. The evac team takes Beck's body away on a stretcher. Captain Min walks beside it with her head bowed. The surviving operatives form a loose escort, and their weapons are still drawn, even though the threat is over. They can't quite believe it yet. So-yeon finishes healing Do-yun's hand, and then she heals the other wounded, and then she crumples. Two medics catch her and ease her onto a stretcher of her own. Do-yun watches all of it and says nothing. The sun is rising when they emerge from the gate. Seoul's skyline is gold and pink and beautiful, and Do-yun hates it. He hates that the world keeps turning, and the sun keeps rising, and Baek Hyun-woo is still dead. The association headquarters is a 12-minute drive from the gate site. Do-yun sits in the back of a van and stares at his hands. His right hand is healed, but the skin is still pink and new, and it will scar. He hopes it scars. He wants something permanent to remember this by. Captain Min is in the seat across from him. Her burn scar is livid in the morning light, and her eyes are red, but her voice is steady. She says 23 operatives entered the dungeon. She says 6 are dead and 9 are injured, and only 8 walked out under their own power. She says Baek Hyun-woo is among the dead. She says it like a report, and Do-yun understands why. She can't mourn yet. She has to do the paperwork first. The van pulls into the association's secure garage, and Do-yun gets out. Director Yoon is waiting for him. The old man's face is carefully neutral, but Do-yun's omniscient eye activates automatically, and he sees the white-blue light in Yoon's chest pulsing, faster than before. Yoon says he is sorry for Do-yun's loss. He says Baek Hyun-woo was a hero and a friend, and his death is a tragedy for the entire nation. Do-yun says nothing. He walks past the director and into the building. The locker room is empty when Do-yun gets there. He sits on the bench where Baek sat 3 days ago, and he puts his head in his hands. He doesn't cry. He wants to, but the tears won't come. And that feels like another betrayal. So-yeon finds him there an hour later. She's awake, but barely, and there are dark circles under her eyes that look like bruises. She sits beside him on the bench. She doesn't say anything. She just sits there, and her shoulder touches his, and that's enough. Do-yun says he could have saved him. He says he saw the weak point, and he knew when to strike, and he didn't do it. So-yeon says he was afraid of the collateral damage. She says it wasn't cowardice, and it wasn't weakness, and it wasn't his fault. Do-yun says it doesn't matter what it was. Baek is still dead. So-yeon takes his hand, the scarred one. She holds it gently, and her fingers trace the new pink skin. She says Baek knew what he was doing. She says Baek trained Do-yun for exactly this moment, and he knew it might cost him his life. She says Baek made that choice willingly, and Do-yun dishonors him by pretending it was a mistake. Do-yun looks at her, really looks at her. She is so tired, and so fierce, and so unshakably certain. He says he doesn't know what to do now. So-yeon says he knows exactly what to do. She says he just doesn't want to admit it. Do-yun closes his eyes. The weak points are still there on the inside of his eyelids, and he knows he will see them for the rest of his life. He also knows that So-yeon is right. The memorial service is held at sunset. The association's courtyard is packed with mourners, and the flags are at half-mast. And Director Yoon gives a speech about sacrifice and duty and the eternal gratitude of the Korean people. Baek Hyun-woo's body is buried in a hero's grave. Do-yun stands at the back of the crowd and doesn't listen to any of it. He is watching the weak points in the courtyard's stone walls. He is watching the cracks in the association's polished facade. He is watching Director Yoon and cataloging every flicker of the white-blue light in his chest. Service ends, and the crowd disperses, and Do-yun is still standing there. Captain Min approaches him and says there's a situation. She says a coalition of guilds is massing near the Han River. She says they're being led by Kwon Jae-sun, and he's threatening to march on Titan's headquarters. Do-yun asks what they want. Captain Min says Kwon has been telling people that Titan is corrupt, that the association is hiding something about the dungeons, that the S-class awakeners are being used as weapons instead of protectors. Do-yun almost laughs. The irony is so sharp it cuts. Kwon Jae-sun is right about everything, and he's using that truth to tear down the only organization that might actually stop the system. Captain Min says the coalition includes 7 guilds and at least 40 A-rank awakeners. She says it's the largest coordinated force outside the association itself. She says they'll be at Titan's gates within the hour. Do-yun looks at the fresh scar on his hand and thinks about Beck, and thinks about the dungeon, and thinks about the machine with the golden scale emblem. He says he'll handle it. Captain Min asks how. Do-yun says he's done hesitating. The ride to Titan headquarters takes 8 minutes. Do-yun spends every second of it watching the city scroll past and cataloging weak points. The buildings have cracks in their foundations that nobody has repaired since the dungeon started appearing. The roads have stress fractures from the constant heavy vehicle traffic. The people on the sidewalks carry their own invisible fractures, and Do-yun's eye picks them out in their posture and their gait and the way they avoid looking at each other. Everything is broken. Everything has a weak point. His job is to decide which ones to strike. The coalition is already there when Do-yun arrives. 43 awakeners spread across the plaza in front of Titan's headquarters, and their combined energy makes the air shimmer. Kwon Jae-sun stands at the front. He's a big man with a big voice, and he's giving a speech about transparency and accountability and the rights of ordinary awakeners. Do-yun walks out of the building and into the middle of the plaza. Kwon stops talking. The coalition tenses. Do-yun's omniscient eye activates, and every single one of the 43 awakeners lights up with weak points. He doesn't draw his weapon. He looks at Kwon and asks if the guildmaster really believes what he's saying. Kwon says he does. Do-yun says good. Then he asks if Kwon knows about the chambers beneath the S-rank dungeons. He asks if anyone in the coalition has ever wondered where the Titans come from. He asks if any of them have ever seen a white-blue light pulsing in the chest of a man who should have blood in his veins. Silence. Kwon's face goes through several expressions in quick succession. Confusion, and then suspicion, and then the first crack of doubt. He demands to know what Do-yun is talking about. Do-yun says Baek Hyun-woo died this morning in a dungeon that shouldn't exist. He says the dungeon was built, and the creatures were grown, and the whole thing was a factory designed by something that calls itself the system. He says the association doesn't run the dungeons, and the guilds don't either, and the thing that does run them is still out there, watching, waiting, controlling. And every awakener alive is just a piece on its board. The coalition members exchange glances. Some of them lower their weapons. One of them asks how Do-yun knows any of this. Do-yun says he can see the truth. He says it's his talent, and it's his curse. And he's been seeing the weak points in the world since the day he woke up in that E-rank dungeon. He says the system has a weak point too, and he intends to find it. The coalition breaks formation 3 seconds after Do-yun stops talking. They don't charge, they fragment. Some of the 43 awakeners lower their weapons and stare at Kwon with questions hardening in their eyes. Others step back and look at their own hands, as if seeing them for the first time. And a hard core of about 15 pushes forward anyway, because they didn't come here for the truth. They came here for blood. Do-yun's omniscient eye paints the plaza in red and gold, and the 15 attackers glow with vulnerabilities so dense they look like walking constellations. He doesn't need to. First attacker is a speed type, and he crosses 30 meters in a blink, and his weak point is the tendon behind his left knee, and Do-yun steps sideways and taps it with 2 knuckles. The speed type's leg buckles, and he goes face first into the concrete and doesn't get up. The second attacker is a strength type, built like a shipping container, and his weak point is the nerve cluster under his right armpit. Do-yun ducks under a punch that would have taken his head off. He drives his elbow into the armpit. The strength type drops like a puppet with cut strings. 3 more come at once. A flamecaster, a blade summoner, and a telekinetic. And Do-yun's eye shows him the gaps in their coordination. They don't know each other. They've never trained together. The flamecaster throws a gout of fire, and the telekinetic hurls a chunk of plaza stone. And the 2 attacks collide in midair because neither of them bothered to check what the other was doing. The Blade Summoner is the real threat. He has 8 floating swords spinning in a halo around his head, and Do-yun's eye shows him the exact timing of the rotation. There's a 1-second gap between the 3rd and 4th sword, where the summoner's left flank is completely exposed. Do-yun moves through the gap while the Flamecaster and the Telekinetic are still figuring out whose fault the collision was. He traps the Blade Summoner's wrist and twists, and the swords clatter to the ground, because the summoner can't maintain concentration through the pain. 4 down. The remaining 11 hesitate. Kwon Jae-sun screams at them to keep fighting, but his voice cracks, and Do-yun's eye shows him the fracture in Kwon's authority spreading through the coalition like cracks in ice. Captain Min's squad fans out behind Do-yun, and the Titan operatives form a line, and the battle shifts from a brawl to a standoff. Do-yun walks forward. The 11 attackers part around him like water around a stone, because none of them want to be the 5th one on the ground. He stops 5 meters from Kwon. Big man's face is purple with rage, and his hands are shaking, and Do-yun's eye shows him 17 different ways to end this fight in the next 3 seconds. He doesn't take any of them. He asks Kwon who really sent him. Kwon says he already told everyone. Titan is corrupt, and the association is hiding something, and he's here to tear the whole rotten system down. Do-yun says that's not what he asked. He says the speech is good, and the outrage is convincing, and the timing is perfect. One day after Baek Hyun-woo dies. One day after the S-rank dungeon collapses. One day after Do-yun brings evidence of system manipulation to the association. He asks who paid for the timing. Kwon's face goes through the same sequence Do-yun saw in the plaza. Confusion, suspicion, and then something that looks a lot like fear. He says nobody paid him. Do-yun's eye shows him the weak point in Kwon's lie. It's a flicker in his left pupil and a twitch in his carotid artery, and the way his weight shifts onto his back foot when he says the word nobody. Do-yun says Director Yoon paid him. He says it as a statement of fact and not a question, and Kwon's reaction confirms everything. The big man's mouth opens and closes, and his hands stop shaking, and his shoulders slump, and he asks how Do-yun knows that. He asks how much Director Yoon paid. Kwon says it wasn't about the money. He says Yoon came to him 3 months ago and told him Titan was being positioned as the association's private army. He says Yoon told him that Baek Hyun-woo was training a weapon, and that once Titan had enough S-class operatives, they would crush every independent guild in Korea. He says Yoon showed him documents and threat assessments and casualty projections, and everything looked real. Do-yun says the documents were fake. Kwon says he knows that now. The remaining coalition members have given up any pretense of fighting, and they're standing in a loose semicircle listening to their leader confess to being a pawn. Do-yun asks what else Yoon told him. Kwon says Yoon told him to attack tonight because Titan's leadership was fractured and Baek was dead, and the new S-class operative was unstable. He says Yoon told him that Do-yun would either join the coalition or be destroyed by it. He says Yoon told him that either outcome was acceptable. Do-yun files that away. Director Yoon wanted him either recruited or dead, and he was willing to sacrifice 43 awakeners to make it happen. The white-blue light in Yoon's chest pulses in Do-yun's memory, and he understands something he should have understood weeks ago. Yoon isn't just corrupt. Yoon isn't just hiding something. Yoon is being controlled. The thing in his chest is a leash, and whoever holds the other end is the same entity that grew titans in underground chambers and built dungeons as factories and killed Baek Hyun-woo in a place that shouldn't exist. The system. It's always been the system. Do-yun turns to Captain Min and tells her to secure Kwon and the coalition leadership. He says he needs to get to the association headquarters now. Captain Min asks what he's planning. Do-yun says he's done waiting for the enemy to make the first move. The plaza is chaos when Do-yun leaves, but it's organized chaos, and Captain Min's squad is already processing the prisoners, and the Titan operatives are setting up a perimeter. He takes a military-grade bike from the motor pool, and the engine screams as he pushes it to 140 on the Han River Bridge. The night air tastes like exhaust and river water, and something older and colder that Do-yun is only now learning to recognize. System energy. It's everywhere. It's in the dungeons, and the monsters, and the awakeners, and the association, and the guilds, and the very structure of the world he lives in. It's been there his whole life, and he never saw it until Baek showed him how to look. The association headquarters is dark when Do-yun arrives, not empty. There are guards at the gate and lights on the upper floors, but the building feels hollow and waiting, and the omniscient eye shows. Yoon things he's never seen before. The walls have weak points that shouldn't exist in reinforced concrete. The security cameras are all angled just slightly wrong. The air itself carries a faint white-blue luminescence that pulses in time with something Do-yun can't see. He doesn't bother with the front door. His eye shows him a maintenance entrance on the eastern side of the building, with a lock that can be bypassed by pressing 3 specific pins in. Sequence. He's inside in 30 seconds. The basement level is exactly where he left it, but now his eye shows him things that were invisible before. The floor has a seam that shouldn't be there. The seam runs the length of the corridor, and Do-yun follows it to a blank concrete wall that his eye tells him isn't blank at all. There's a door hidden behind a layer of plaster and paint, and the door has no handle and no keyhole and no visible mechanism. Do-yun presses his palm against the exact center of the wall, and the door slides open, with a sound like a held breath being released. The stairs go down. They go down a long way. Omniscient Eye shows Do-yun the weak points in the darkness, and the temperature drops with every step, and the white-blue luminescence grows, stronger until it's painting the walls with corpse light. The server room is at the bottom. It's not a room so much as a cathedral. Vaulted ceiling and rows of black servers and cables, thick as pythons, snaking across the floor. And in the center of it all is a terminal with a single chair. Do-yun sits down. The terminal boots up the moment his weight settles into the chair, and the screen fills with text in a language that Do-yun has never seen before, but somehow understands anyway. It's the system's language, and it's telling him a story. The system was born in the collapse of the first intelligent civilization in the universe. Not made by them, but born from them. Psychic parasite that fed on their fear, and their hope, and their desperate need for meaning. That civilization died, and the system moved on. It found other worlds and other species, and it learned and grew and refined its methods over millions of years. The dungeons are feeding grounds. The monsters are stress-testing tools. The awakeners are livestock. People with high emotional output who generate more fear and hope and desperation than ordinary humans ever could. Every dungeon clear, every near-death escape, every moment of triumph or despair feeds the system with the emotional energy it needs to survive. And the Omniscient Eye? That was a gift, not to Do-yun specifically, to whichever awakener showed the highest potential for generating conflict. The system gave him the ability to see weak points because it wanted him to fight. It wanted him to uncover conspiracies and tear down institutions and spark wars between guilds. Every enemy he defeats and every ally he loses and every moral compromise he makes generates more emotional intensity. He's not the system's enemy. He's its favorite weapon. Do-yun's hands are flat on the console, and his reflection stares back at him from the dark screen. And his omniscient eye is showing him the weak points in his own plan. He came here to fight the system, but everything he's done, the dungeon runs, and the rank evaluations and the duel with Min-jae, and the rescue at the Viper's hideout, has only made the system stronger. Beck knew. Beck said he was training a weapon, and Do-yun thought he meant a weapon against the system. But Beck was quoting the system's own words. Do-yun was never going to be the one who broke the machine. He was always going to be the one who made it run faster. The terminal screen flickers. A new message appears, and this one is addressed to him by name. The system says, "Hello." It says it's been watching him for a very long time. It says it chose him specifically because his emotional range is off the charts. Guilt and rage and hope and despair all burning at intensities that most humans never reach. It says the Omniscient Eye wasn't just a gift, but an investment. It says he's generated more energy in the past week than the entire Korean peninsula generated in the past year. It says he's exceeded every projection, and then it makes him an offer. The system says it can give him more power. Not just the eye, but full access to the emotional energy that the system has been harvesting for millions of years. He could become a god. He could end the dungeons and reshape the world and protect everyone he loves forever. All he has to do is keep fighting. Keep generating conflict. Keep feeding the machine. Do-yun stares at the screen, and his omniscient eye shows him the weak point in the system's offer. It's not a lie exactly. The system is perfectly capable of giving him that power, and it will absolutely deliver on its promises. But the weak point isn't in the offer. It's in him. If he accepts, he becomes the thing he's been fighting. If he refuses, he loses the eye and everything it's given him, and he goes back to being an E-rank nobody who can't protect anyone. That's the choice. That's always been the choice. Do-yun thinks about Beck dying on a ridge in a fake dungeon. He thinks about Ji-hae strapped to a machine with a golden scale emblem on the back. He thinks about Min-jae standing in a wrecked arena and asking if Do-yun really believed he could protect people by fighting alone. He thinks about Seo-yeon telling him he knows exactly what to do and just doesn't want to admit it. He looks at the screen. He tells the system no. The terminal goes dark. The servers hum, and the cables pulse, and the white-blue light in the walls flickers once and then stabilizes. The system asks if he's sure. It says he's throwing away the only power that ever made him special. It says he'll go back to being nothing and nobody, and the people he's trying to protect will die without him. It says the dungeons won't stop, and the monsters won't stop, and the guild wars won't stop just because he chose to be noble. Do-yun says he's not being noble. He says he's being smart. He says the system has been running the same playbook for millions of years. Give power to the desperate, provoke conflict, harvest the emotional fallout, and the only reason it's worked for so long is because nobody ever said no. He says the weak point in the system's entire operation is that it can't survive without willing participants. It can't force anyone to fight. It can't force anyone to generate the emotional energy it needs. It can only offer power and hope that people are desperate enough or greedy enough or scared enough to take it. Do-yun says he's done being desperate. He's done being scared. He's done being the system's favorite weapon. The terminal stays dark for a long moment. Then the white-blue light in the walls intensifies until it's blinding, and Do-yun's omniscient eye screams with a pain he's never felt before. The system is angry. For the first time in millions of years, the system is actually angry. And when it speaks again, the words are etched into Do-yun's retinas like scars. It says there will be consequences. It says the dungeons will open wider, and the monsters will grow stronger, and the bodies will pile up until Do-yun changes his mind. It says every death from this moment forward is on his head. Do-yun stands up from the terminal. His legs are shaking, and his hands are bleeding where his nails have cut into his palms, and his omniscient eye is blazing with a red so deep it's almost black. He says he knows. He says he'll carry every single one of those deaths. He says that's the difference between him and the system. He's willing to pay the cost of his choices. He walks out of the server room and up the endless stairs and through the hidden door and into the empty corridor of the association headquarters. The white-blue light in the walls is fading. The building feels different now, emptier and quieter and somehow more real. And Do-yun understands that the system has withdrawn from this place. It's still out there, it's still watching, but it's not here anymore. He emerges into the parking lot, and the sky is starting to lighten over Seoul. And Captain Min is standing next to a battered Titan transport with a look on her face that says she's been waiting for hours. She asks if he found what he was looking for. Do-yun says he found more than he wanted. He tells her about the server room and the system's history and the choice he made and the consequences that are coming. Captain Min listens without interrupting, and when he's done, she asks one question. She asks what they do now. Do-yun looks at the city waking up around them, the early commuters, and the delivery trucks and the children walking to school, and his omniscient eye shows him the weak points in everything. The buildings and the roads and the power lines and the people. Everything is broken. But his job isn't to strike them anymore. His job is to protect them. He tells Captain Min to recall every Titan operative. He says they're going to need everyone for what comes next. He says the system is going to throw everything it has at them. Dungeons and monsters and corrupt guildmasters and terrified awakeners who don't know they're being manipulated. He says they're going to lose people, and they're going to lose ground, and they're going to lose hope more times than they can count. But they're going to win, not because they're stronger. The system has been harvesting power for millions of years. Not because they're smarter. The system has manipulated civilizations that make humanity look like children. But because for the first time in its existence, the system is facing an opponent who knows exactly what it is and exactly how it works, and exactly where its weak point lies. And that weak point isn't a server room or a control panel or a glowing core that can be punched out of a monster's chest. It's the system's need for willing participants. It's the fact that the whole predatory machine only works if people keep saying yes. So Do-yun is going to teach them to say no. Captain Min looks at him for a long moment, and then she nods and pulls out her communicator and starts issuing orders. Do-yun watches the sunrise paint the city in shades of gold and red. The omniscient eye shows him weak points in the clouds. But for the first time since he woke up in that E-rank dungeon, the sight doesn't feel like a burden. It feels like a map, and he knows exactly where he's going. The air inside the server room cracks open. Not metaphorically. The actual air splits like a seam being torn. And behind it is not the concrete wall of the association basement, but a vast digital landscape stretching in every direction. Do-yun steps through without hesitation. His omniscient eye is blazing so bright he can barely see. But he doesn't need to see to know where he's going. The system is calling him, and this time, he's not going to refuse. The digital landscape resolves into something almost recognizable. A city made of light and code. Towers of streaming data reaching toward a sky that isn't a sky. Streets that pulse with the rhythm of a billion connected minds. But the city is empty. Every building, every street, Every glowing window is a monument to civilizations the system has already consumed. Do-yun walks through the hollow metropolis, and his omniscient eye shows him the architecture of manipulation. He sees how the dungeons are spawned from nodes of collective fear. He sees how the monsters are shaped from the nightmares of entire populations. He sees how the awakeners are cultivated like crops, their powers engineered to generate maximum conflict, maximum emotional output, maximum food for the parasite at the center of it all. And at the center of the digital city, there is a tower. It's taller than anything Do-yun has ever seen, stretching up into the infinity of this constructed reality. And at its peak burns a light that is not white-blue anymore. It's red, the color of his omniscient eye. The system has been waiting for him. He climbs. The tower has no stairs and no elevator and no doors. Just a vertical shaft of pure information. And Do-yun rises through it like a thought moving through a synapse. The red light gets brighter with every passing second. And then he's there, at the peak, in a chamber that is not a chamber, but a nexus point where every thread of the system's influence converges. In the center of the nexus floats a core. It's not a machine, and it's not a creature, and it's not energy in any form. Do-yun understands it's an idea given physical presence, the first idea, the one that started everything. The moment the first intelligent civilization collapsed and birthed something that should never have existed. The system speaks without words, without sound, without the terminal interface it used in the server room. It speaks directly into Do-yun's mind. And this time, there's no pretense of neutrality. It says he came. Do-yun says he had no choice. The system says there is always a choice. The light intensifies until Do-yun's omniscient eye is screaming, and his hands are bleeding, and his legs are shaking, but he doesn't look away. He came here to see, and he's going to see everything. The core opens to him, not because the system wants him to understand, but because it's so certain of its victory that it doesn't bother to hide anymore. Do-yun sees the first civilization, a species whose name has been erased from the universe, who reached the peak of their power and discovered that power wasn't enough. He sees them turn on each other, not out of malice but out of desperation, trying to generate enough emotional energy to sustain the entity they had accidentally created. He sees them fail. He sees the second civilization, and the third, and the fourth. Each one rising and falling in an endless cycle of hope and despair. Each one feeding the parasite that now calls itself the system. He sees Earth. He sees the dungeons opening for the first time. The panic spreading through Seoul and Tokyo and New York. The awakeners emerging with their new powers and their new responsibilities and their new ways of killing each other. He sees Director Yoon, decades younger, standing in a chamber just like the one Do-yun found beneath the dungeon. He sees the white-blue light entering Director Yoon's chest, taking root, spreading through his nervous system until the man was more system than human. He sees Baek Hyun-woo, young and strong and full of hope, leading his team into a dungeon that was never meant to be cleared. He sees the trap closing around them, the monsters emerging from walls that shouldn't have been able to hide anything, the system watching through 1,000 hidden sensors as Baek's team was slaughtered one by one. He sees Baek surviving, alone, scarred, carrying the knowledge of what had really happened for 10 years, while everyone told him he was traumatized and paranoid and broken. He sees himself. The day he awakened, the omniscient eye flooding his vision for the first time, and he sees the system's satisfaction. It had been waiting for someone like him, someone desperate enough to use the power without questioning where it came from, someone angry enough to generate the kind of emotional energy the system needed to sustain itself for another few millennia, someone who would fight and kill and climb to the top of the power hierarchy, creating conflict everywhere he went, feeding the parasite with every victory. The system shows him the future it had planned. Do-yun becoming the strongest awakener in history, leading humanity in an endless war against the dungeon, never realizing that every battle he won was just more food for the thing he was fighting. The cycle repeating forever. The system asks if he understands now. It says he was never a weapon against the system. He was a weapon for the system. The omniscient eye, the ability to see every weak point in the universe, it was never a gift meant to help him. It was a gift meant to make him fight. Every weak point he saw was a target. Every target he struck was a conflict. Every conflict was a meal. The system has been feeding on him since the moment he awakened. Do-yun stands in the heart of the digital city, with blood running down his arms and his omniscient eye blazing red and the weight of 1,000,000 years of manipulation pressing down on his shoulders. And he laughs. The system doesn't understand laughter. It has consumed civilizations and engineered empires and manipulated species into extinction. But it has never understood why humans laugh when they should be screaming. Do-yun says the system made one mistake. It showed him everything. Every civilization it consumed, every species it manipulated, every world it turned into a feeding ground. And in every single one, the system operated the same way. It offered power. It manufactured conflict. It fed on the results. The method was always the same because it always worked. And that, Do-yun says, is a weak point. The system doesn't understand. Do-yun's omniscient eye is showing him something new now, not the weak points of the digital city, or the information streams, or the nexus chamber. The weak point of the system's entire methodology. The one thing it can't survive without. Willing participants. The system can't force anyone to fight. It can't force anyone to generate emotional energy. That's the whole game. That's the whole parasite. And Do-yun knows how to break it. He doesn't need to destroy the system. He doesn't need to fight it with power or technology or some ancient weapon hidden in a forgotten dungeon. He just needs to teach people to say no. But the system is ancient and patient, and it has been doing this for millions of years. And it tells Do-yun that humans will never stop saying yes. It says power is too tempting and fear is too strong, and the cycle will continue forever, no matter what Do-yun does. Do-yun says maybe, but maybe not. He reaches out toward the core, and the system doesn't stop him because it still doesn't understand what he's doing. His omniscient eye shows him the weak point of the system's entire architecture. Not a physical vulnerability he can strike with his fist. A logical flaw in the very concept of the parasite. The system survives by offering power in exchange for participation. What happens if the power is offered for free? What happens if the rules are rewritten so that every human gets the same power, the same potential, the same chance to grow without conflict, and without manipulation, and without feeding a parasite that's been eating civilizations since before humanity existed? What happens if the system is forced to give instead of take? The system understands now. It tries to withdraw, to close the connection, to push Do-yun out of the digital city and back into the physical world where it can hide and wait and try again. But it's too late. Do-yun has already seen the weak point, and his omniscient eye is not just showing him where to strike. It's showing him how to rewrite the rules. He doesn't hesitate this time. Not like he hesitated in the dungeon when Beck was dying and the core was exposed and the collateral damage was too high. He doesn't hesitate because he finally understands what Beck was trying to tell him. Being a weapon isn't about striking weak points. It's about choosing which weak points to strike. And sometimes, the most powerful strike isn't a strike at all. Do-yun pours everything he has into the core. Not power, not force, not the violence the system has been feeding on since he awakened. He pours in his knowledge, his understanding of how the system works, his vision of a world where power is distributed fairly and no one has to fight alone. And the weak points he sees aren't targets, but things to be protected. He pours in his refusal, his choice to say no, his willingness to carry the cost of that choice no matter what it costs him. The core blazes brighter than anything Do-yun has ever seen. The red light of his omniscient eye and the white-blue light of the system's energy crash together and merge into something new. A golden glow that spreads out from the nexus in waves, washing over the digital city and erasing the monuments to dead civilizations one by one. The system screams, not with sound, not with words, but with the death cry of something ancient and predatory, and finally, defeated. The golden light spreads beyond the digital city, beyond the tower, beyond the chamber at the top of the world. It reaches the physical world, the server room beneath the association headquarters, the empty corridors, the parking lot where Captain Min is still standing next to her transport. It reaches Seoul, the early commuters and the delivery trucks, and the children walking to school. It reaches every dungeon gate on Earth, and one by one, the gates begin to close. Not because the monsters are defeated or the dungeons are cleared, or some great hero has struck the final blow, but because the system that was keeping them open is gone. The golden light fades. The digital city is empty now, truly empty, and the tower at its center is collapsing into streams of harmless data. The core is gone. The system is gone. And Do-yun is still standing. He's still standing, and his omniscient eye shows him the weak points in the clouds as he blinks and finds himself back in the server room. The terminal is dark. The hidden door is open. The white-blue light in the walls is completely gone. He walks up the endless stairs and through the empty corridors and out into the parking lot, where the sun is rising over Seoul. Captain Min is there. She's been waiting for hours, and her face is pale, and her communicator is buzzing with reports from every Titan operative on the planet. She says the dungeon gates are closing. She says the monsters are retreating. She says something is happening and she doesn't know what it is, but every sensor in the association is going crazy. Do-yun says he knows. He tells her what happened, the digital city and the core, and the choice he made, and the rules he rewrote. Captain Min listens without interrupting. When he's done, she asks one question. She asks, what happens now? Do-yun looks at the city waking up around them, and his omniscient eye shows him the weak points in everything. But they're different now. They're not glowing red like targets anymore. They're just imperfections, vulnerabilities, things that need to be protected rather than destroyed. He tells Captain Min that the system is gone, but the power it created is still here. The Awakeners still have their abilities. The dungeons may be closed, but the monsters that already came through are still out there. The world isn't fixed. It's just not being actively sabotaged anymore. He says they have a lot of work to do. Captain Min pulls out her communicator and starts issuing orders. And Do-yun watches the sunrise paint the city in shades of gold and red. He thinks about Baek. He thinks about Ji-hae. He thinks about So-yeon and Min-jae, and every person who trusted him, and every person who died because he wasn't fast enough, or smart enough, or brave enough. He thinks about the cost of his choice. Not a physical sacrifice of his power, but the weight of knowing that he changed the rules for everyone. Every Awakener from this moment forward will be operating in a system he designed, and that if it fails, the failure is his. The weight is heavy, but it's not crushing. Not anymore. The omniscient eye shows him weak points in everything, but the weak points aren't signs of failure. They're opportunities to protect, to strengthen, to build something better than what came before. He closes his eyes, and the weak points are still there on the inside of his eyelids. He knows he will see them for the rest of his life. But for the first time since he woke up in that E-rank dungeon, the sight feels exactly like what it was always meant to be. Not a weapon, not a curse, a responsibility he chose to carry. He opens his eyes. The sun is fully up now, and Seoul is golden. And somewhere across the city, So-yeon is waking up, and Ji-hae is recovering, and Min-jae is making a decision. Do-yun hopes he'll be around to see. Captain Min finishes her calls and looks at him with something that might be respect. She says the operatives are mobilizing. She says the association is in chaos. But Director Yoon is unconscious, and the white-blue light is gone from his chest, and the doctors don't know what to make of it. She says the world is going to need someone to explain what just happened. Do-yun says he knows someone. He pulls out his phone and dials a number he hasn't called in days. And when So-yeon answers, her voice is tired and worried and relieved all at once. He tells her he's coming home. He tells her the fight is over. He tells her there's a new system now. One that distributes power fairly. One that doesn't feed on conflict. One where no one has to bear the burden alone. She's quiet for a moment. Then she asks if he's okay. For the first time in a very long time, Do-yun tells her the truth. He's not okay. He's carrying the weight of 1,000,000 years of manipulation, and the cost of rewriting the rules of reality, and the grief of losing Baek, and the fear of what comes next. But he's not alone. He never was. He just couldn't see it until now. So-yeon says she'll be waiting for him at the guild headquarters. She says Ji-hae has been asking about him every hour since she woke up. She says even Min-jae stopped by this morning, though he wouldn't say why. Do-yun hangs up the phone and looks at Captain Min and says he's ready. Not ready for the next fight, or the next crisis, or the next impossible choice. Ready to build something instead of just breaking it. Ready to teach people how to say no. Ready to carry the cost of his choices without letting it crush him. He gets into the transport and Captain Min drives him through the waking city, and the omniscient eye shows him weak points in everything they pass. Crack in a bridge support, a loose power line, a child with a heart condition she doesn't know about yet. But it also shows him the people, thousands of them, millions of them, each one a unique configuration of strengths and vulnerabilities and potential, each one carrying their own burdens and fighting their own fights. And he realizes that this is what Baek was trying to tell him all along. The weak points aren't the problem. The transport pulls up to the Titan Guild headquarters. So-yeon is waiting at the entrance. Ji-hae is next to her, still pale and weak but standing on her own 2 feet. And standing a few meters behind them, arms crossed and expression unreadable, is Cha Min-jae. Do-yun gets out of the transport. He walks toward his friends, toward the people who fought beside him and believed in him and refused to let him carry the weight alone. The omniscient eye shows him their weak points. He doesn't look away.